Welcome to High Stakes, episode 13. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. And my guest today is a fellow DFS professional with double-digit six-figure wins across several sports on DraftKings and FanDuel. Perhaps most impressively, she won the FanDuel NBA Fantasy Live Final last July, followed by a Millie Maker on FanDuel in NFL in September. Rebecca, that is quite the streak you've got going. This past year has been an incredible run. But what's better, being a great DFS player or being a Wisconsin sports fan?
That's the best part. Right now, they can just work simultaneously. I didn't think that would ever be a thing, but I mean, like I said before, fantasy, I only really wanted to go to that live contest knowing that the Bucks were going to be in the finals, or at least having the confidence. My whole life, I haven't been able to say something like that, like Bucks being good. So it's pretty special.
I'm quite jealous as a Minnesota sports fan. The Timberwolves made the playoffs and we celebrated like they had won the championship, as of course everybody saw. That was very exciting for me, just getting into the playoffs. So I can't even imagine winning an NBA title. And then of course you've had great quarterbacks on the Packers for you. Are you a Packers fan? I should make sure that's I figured you were a Packers fan. Yeah. So that's pretty fortunate as well, just having Hall of Fame quarterbacks your entire life. How are you feeling about Aaron Rodgers these days? Do you think he's going to be around long for the Packers?
Well, everyone thought I was crazy when I said like he's definitely staying last year. And then again this year. I think that after watching him for so long, he has a certain personality I've seen before, which I like his personality. I love the dry sense of humor. I like when he has a little bit of attitude. He just really cares. And I just always thought like, no, he's just like kind of being like, a little angsty, but like he knows he's gonna stay here. He knows he wouldn't want to let anybody down here. Like, why would you give up a good thing just because of like whatever drama was going on? And Wisconsinites like to talk and they like to say they hate him and then they love him and then they hate him. But I've always maintained I love him and he will keep coming back.
All right, so you had full faith that he was coming back the whole time. Of course, in Minnesota, we were praying for that he was going to leave. Finally, get rid of the Packers, get rid of their Hall of Fame quarterback. So that was disappointing for us when he finally came back. At least finally they got rid of Davante Adams. Love to see that as a Vikings fan.
I don't think I could get out of bed that morning. That was just really. I mean, I love Davante Adams too. I think as a Wisconsin fan, I'm so lucky to have these. First of all-star players, but then the type of players that they just seem like good people after the game. They don't really ruffle feathers because they don't care to hurt anybody. They're just like, I'm doing my job and I'm making my people happy. And I just think that Davante Adams is that type of guy. Obviously, all the Bucks players are like that to me.
Yeah.
But
as a Minnesota sports fan, it is kind of obnoxious that most of the Wisconsin players are likable. Like we want to hate Wisconsin athletes, right? There's kind of a lot of rivalries going on there, but it's like you can't really hate on the Bucks. You got to love Giannis. You got to love Drew. It's a fun team. So yeah, it's really hard to hate.
When I lived in Minnesota, I would get so sad because people would talk crap about my teams all the time. They would make fun of me. And I just remember someone finally saying, it's because they're jealous. Like, I just thought you guys were kind of being like a-holes. And I'm like, people in Minnesota are so passive aggressive. And I don't understand why they're not nice to me because I never talked bad about Minnesota sports when I lived there. But the one thing they liked more than when their team won was when the Packers lost.
Yeah, we're totally jealous, 100% jealousy. It's like my dog. I've got a little dog and there's another dog on the corner. We go for walks. And when we walk by this other dog's house, it's a big dog, looks imposing. My dog just barks and barks and barks at this other dog. And that dog doesn't care at all. It's like my dog is Minnesota sports fans. The big dog who doesn't care about the little dog is Wisconsin sports fans. I know how it is. It's rough here in Minnesota. All right. Let's talk about your background in DFS a little bit. And I should start. I didn't say this at the top of the show. I should have said your Twitter is at rjako22. Am I pronouncing that rjako22?
Jakobic, yes.
rjako22. FanDuel at rjako22. And then on DraftKings, you are at rjako22, JAKO22 is where people can find
incognito
you.
Username.
Your incognito, yeah. Yeah. Do you want to tell me about why you have that username then? Why did you go incognito there?
So, I mean, I think when I first made the rjako22, for FanDuel, I didn't think about like people ever recognizing me. I thought there's just a billion people I don't know on here. Then I started realizing, oh, all the people around me, all the guys around me, like when I was interning at the radio station, they're all playing. And I mean, I'm probably going to suck right away. So then when I did the DraftKings, I definitely knew my brother had started playing. And I'm like, I just don't want, there's not a lot of Jacobics in the world. I don't want people to see if I like put up a lot of money and they think like, what are you doing? You don't have that. You can't afford that right now. So I just don't want anyone to know. I just wanted to be a little bit more incognito. But then now I'm like, oh, I wish I could switch it back to rjako22 for DraftKings, so it could just be one name.
Everybody would recognize you. I mean, when you've won as much as you have, you're not going to be anonymous anymore anyway. But yeah, it is kind of nice to have the same name on multiple sites. So that's a bummer that that it worked out that way. All right. So you mentioned that you were that you worked for a radio station, which you of course told me about previously. But we'll get to that. Let's talk about that a little bit for the guests too. But let's start with this. Are you a full-time pro DFS player?
I am. Even though I try not to say that too much to people because they think I'm crazy for that. But there's just like so many reasons, so many factors that went into it. And of course, like when I did decide to like jump like absolutely headfirst into DFS and be super serious about it, not just what I was doing before. What I was doing before was like hoping that this amount of money would make me rich like everybody else, not realizing that like you don't know what kind of entries they put in. You don't know what kind of legwork. You could be really smart, but if you don't have the tools, you're not going to know about like any injuries, like player swaps. I mean, you don't know to do that stuff until you get really serious and you start figuring out what is all out there. Because like I had no idea what kind of tools would be right at my fingertips. So so I was just going to ask, what was the question? I kind of went off on a tangent.
I was just asking if you consider yourself a DFS pro, if you play full-time DFS these days. And it sounds like you've gotten there with kind of learning some tools, kind of led you to becoming a DFS pro.
Yeah, I think when you've like lost enough but won enough to make it still tantalizing, you're like, I know the big one's around the corner, but I know that in order to get it, I have to like go into this fully. And then once I started being very serious, once I started spending all my COVID time, because we didn't leave the house during COVID. I was just, my husband was studying for his CPA exams. I was doing DFS. It was a perfect combination because then we could both be left alone for numerous hours at a time. And then I just was like, this is a whole new world I'm exploring. And I wanted to just do it justice and really take it seriously. But then after you start winning, you realize now I'm not being fair to my job. And like, I really loved and appreciated them. And I didn't think that, when COVID started to let down and everyone started going back to work and everybody's traveling again, I just didn't think I would be fully invested in that. And I can only be fully invested in one thing at a time. I'm very much like I'm not going to finish. I'm not going to do that task until I finish this task kind of person. I like to just give all my attention to one thing. So that I had to do it. I mean, I know people think it's kind of crazy, but when you feel that it's just like the best decision deep down, plus you have some security, plus, I was getting married and, want to buy a house. I'm getting old, might have to start having kids. Why can't I just be a stay-at-home mom and DFS pro at the same time and have all the things I ever wanted at once?
Yeah, why not have it all? Yeah, you want to do one thing whole-assed instead of two things half-assed. I was the same way. I quit my job in September to go DFS full-time as a pro. So did you quit your job before you won the million then?
Actually, I did. I had won quite a few 100K contests, and I kind of set like a number that my husband would be okay with. Like, so say I won this much, then could I quit? And I mean, not that I need his permission, but it's just nice to discuss these types of
He's
things.
your spouse. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, he can tell me whatever he thinks is best, but at the end of the day, I'll follow my heart,
Of course.
And in the back of my mind, I always thought I want to be good enough that I could quit. So I think once I set myself a goal, I'm not going to stop at all until I reach it. I just knew I wanted to be making enough money that quitting would be totally okay. And then, whatever other endeavors I want to do down the line. I mean, I knew I just wanted to be around sports. And so we got to that point, but of course you're going to just like feel a little insecure about your decision. So I told my mom, and she just rolled her eyes at me. I'm like, I'm going to win 100 or $1 million before the end of the year. I'm going to do it. I think I needed that in order to prove to myself and other people, because they can't really tell me no after they see that. So it was very short after that I won the $1 million. And I'm like, oh, thank God. It was like one of those things that I can't believe it happened that way, because I'd already gotten like super close to a couple millions and lost them at the last second or the last hole. So I'm like, if it doesn't happen for me this year, I'll be so mad, especially because I promised everybody I was going to do it. And then first week of football, I'm like, oh, thank God. It was just such a relief.
So you said that you lost one on the last hole. You're talking golf. You were winning a Millie Maker until the very last hole of the entire tournament?
Yes.
Wow.
So this one hurts. It stings, but it was such good motivation. It just like keeps me wanting more. I mean, it sucks that like the drop off from first to second place was $900,000.
Oh, so you got second for 100,000?
100,000.
That is
and
a
everyone
huge drop off.
tries to tell you should be happy. That's still a lot of money. I'm like, but it's 900,000 less than one hole ago. I was in first for an hour, and I couldn't believe it, because I had a player that got cut because I took some recommendation from somebody else about playing this younger guy. He gets cut. I still somehow end up on Sunday. It was Father's Day. Still end up in first place, and it just didn't feel real. So then in the last hole, when Harris English gets a birdie, and he's like not even cracking top 20. He doesn't matter. Because I had a cut guy, I had to have first, second, third place. I had everybody, and this guy who's not going to win anything, birdies. So I lost by less than a point. It was ridiculous, but it also felt like, yes, it was good. It was too good to be true. It was almost like a relief it didn't happen, because it would feel too out of this world. It felt more normal that I would get heartbroken. So it was like a weird sense of relief, plus just so much sadness. But
yeah, that is one of the worst bad beat stories that I've heard, losing $1 million on the last hole. That has got
I've
to be
heard
painful.
worse.
Oh yeah.
Okay, just a real quick story. When I was at the FanDuel baseball championship, the only other woman there was this woman from South Dakota, and everyone's like, you have to meet her. She's so awesome. She's been doing this for a while. She told me that she was in first for $1 million. Game had ended. This was a football championship. She lost her $1 million due to a stat correction.
Ooh.
Like that, I don't know if I could handle.
That's even worse.
Harris English, that was a little more easy to swallow. I don't know, a stat correction that would really, really.
Yeah, that's brutal, and that's happened in Showdown. There was a guy who won with a 5-1 stack in NFL Showdown, where he played 5 players against the opposing defense and was winning at the end of the game, and then a stat correction knocked him back from $1 million to $1,000 or something, because so many people passed him. So it gets pretty bad with DFS. This is why you need a DFS community, though, right? So you can talk about these bad beat stories and have people understand that, yes, I won $100,000, but I'm still not excited about it, because in my mind, I lost $900,000. That's only DFS players, and especially I think pros can kind of understand that pain.
Totally, and the amount of money and work you put into it too. You're like, well, it's not like I was just putting a quarter in a slot machine and then seeing if I would win. This is like, I'm working day and night to do this. So it's not like, oh, okay, I'm happy with what I got. Like, they don't understand. So that was the coolest part about going to my first live event. I didn't know if everyone would accept me into the group there because I didn't know anybody yet. I'm also the only girl, so I think no one knew I was even playing until I was wearing the jersey that they gave us. And then it was like people started having a couple of drinks and they'd want to make conversation. But when I actually got into talking about like the ups and the downs, people are way more open with what they're saying to you about their struggles. It makes you feel validated. It makes you feel kind of at home. I had never felt that yet because I had been like kind of hiding my playing. So I just felt like, wow, like I can just be myself here. This is awesome.
Not just me, it's everybody here goes through these same struggles, has these same thought processes. Yeah, it's a great thing. So is this the FanDuel Fantasy Championship? Was that your first live final? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where you met Alex Baker. I saw some photos of it seemed like a lot of the Awesemo guys were there. So you met a lot of great players.
Yeah. The cool part about winning was that everyone was like, I need to introduce you to Chipotle Addict. I need to introduce you to Awesemo. I'm like, okay, because I've been seeing these guys just crushing it, and they're my, the people I'm trying to strive to be like they're my heroes, my role models. I will never even be in the same conversation as them. And then all of a sudden, people are introducing us, and I don't even have to look like the idiot who goes up to them like, "Hi, I'm your fan." Like, it was so cool because it was like, this is a conversation that he actually wants to have with me, and I'm not like annoying him or anything. We can actually just like talk about what we're doing on DFS because we're going through the same stuff too. He's just at a high level.
Yeah, he's at the highest level, but you had just won the tournament, so obviously you were kind of on top of the world at that point too. I mean that must have been a wild experience. All right.
I was just more happy that the Bucks won, to be honest, and I mean that
really?
with all sincerity. And that's what I said when they had me up on the stage. I'm like, actually, I was so worried about the Bucks pulling this off because they were already down, and I was so sick of all the Suns fans saying that they were done for. Anyway, I needed that win so bad, and then the money on top of that. I had been like working so hard at all the 100K contests, so it wasn't like this was an amount I was so like shocked that I reached, because it was just the amount I was normally getting during the weeks. It just was only made special because of like all the circumstances around it.
Yeah, you're at a live final. It was 150,000, right, for the fantasy final?
That was 150.
Yeah, a live final. You win 150,000, surrounded by all these great DFS players, and your team just won the championship. That's got to be a pretty great feeling.
Indescribable. And my brother was with me, so
nice.
That was cool because I only entered this contest because of two things. I thought the Bucks would be in the finals, and I wanted to bring my brother and ask him to walk me down the aisle for my wedding. And so I did this like super special thing. He loves Miami. He's a workaholic, so when he lets loose, he really lets loose. So I kind of had to keep him on a leash the whole weekend. He was kind of annoying, but he was just like shocked, like, I can't believe my sister's even like doing this stuff. I didn't even know like any of this. And I mean, he was like, I'm building your brand. I was really worried that all the serious guys were going to be annoyed of him, but I think they thought it was pretty funny.
I think everybody's drinking so much at those events. At least the two that I've been to, it's been like, it's an open bar every day, all the time. So a lot of people are pretty drunk. So I'm sure nobody even noticed that he was really drunk.
You can go back and see the video, and you'll find him.
Oh, I haven't seen any video of the event. I should go look for it.
Oh yeah, Is it cute? I gotta say, the ending is really cute.
Yeah, is he ending you hoisting up the trophy?
Yeah, so hoisting up the trophy, but then like right before that, my husband, who was my fiance at the time, he kissed me on the cheek, and they put that in the video. I was like, oh,
that's nice.
We did meet the videographer earlier that day, and he was so cool. So like even everybody from the bar staff, like I still follow one of the girls from the bar on Instagram. Like, she just ended up being so cool and so supportive of me, and she's like telling me she's proud of me. I'm like, why are these women so nice? But any of the wives that were there, it was great. And then when I got the trophy, everybody was chanting girl power, which I just...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It was fun.
That sounds like a great experience. I got to say that you are a better sports fan than I am, because if I had $150,000 on the line with the Timberwolves in the championship, I think money trumps my fandom. I maybe not. It probably depends on how well I'm doing at that time. If I'm on a big roll and already winning a lot of money, I'd probably maybe I'd lean more Timberwolves. But I think for me the money trumps even my favorite teams. So good for you
I
being
mean,
such a big
if the
sports fan.
Timberwolves were in the finals, that's worth $1 million right there. Come on.
That might be true. If it's a Timberwolves, that would be something different. Okay. So one question that I like to ask all of my guests, just to kind of get an idea of what kind of player they are, I start by asking a couple background questions. So what kind of background do you have in statistics? Do you have any formal or informal training?
I saw that on the question sheet of things that might come up, and I was like, this is pretty funny, because all I ever say is I suck at statistics, and people ask like, why I don't do the 150 max contest. I'm like, because I don't like math. I would look foolish like trying to tackle something that I've always tried to stay away from. When I went to college, I'm like, no more math courses for me. So my only statistics I've ever taken was in high school senior year. I had AP Calc for 3 quarters. So that's what made me hate math, was AP Calc right there. Yep. Only class that could bring me to tears. But then the 4th quarter was statistics. And I think like by the end of the year, the teacher doesn't really care. Everybody gets an A. So I'm like, I don't remember being good at it, but I got an A in it. But I probably just copied off my friends' papers. So I'm like, I don't know, I'll never be working with numbers. I never saw a future like dealing with that stuff. And then I get older, I'm like, there's a lot of math I just wish I would have sucked it up and kept going with, because it'd be really helpful just in random things like DFS. So I don't know, I dabbled a little bit in the max entry 150 entry contest, but because I don't really know what I'm doing, I'm too scared to keep it going, but I will probably attempt it again at some point. Yeah. But, to bring back to the point, no background in statistics.
Okay. So, yeah. You're not the first guest that has been their answer. So, it's typically, I think, there's a type of DFS player who is really their entire game is based into statistics, and some who don't even like watch sports, don't know anything about sports. It's just entirely a math game for them. And then I think that I'm sort of somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, where I have a grasp of the stats involved, but it's not something that I have any real history in either. I'm probably not I'm probably closer to your side of the spectrum, which is more you have more background in sports and you use intuition more than and game theory probably a little bit more than actual statistics, which you can find other places.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought it was an interesting idea to take on DFS in a different lens and look at it from a purely statistical way. And discussions I had with my husband when I first started playing, because he would follow and just see what other people are doing, how people are making their money. And it was always like a good idea, but when you meet and see people like Awesemo or anybody who like actually really knows what they're doing, it's just a little intimidating to get into that type of DFS playing. When you're someone like me and you're like, I've been around sports, I know sports, I will still use all the tools. So like I use what other people have put their work into, their genius. If I can't do something better than them, why would I go and try? So I try to just keep it like the most me as possible and not try to be something I can't be. I just want to be super realistic with myself.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I'm totally on the same page. It's like why Awesemo has all these great tools that I use. So I'm not going to go reinvent the wheel when they've already done it for me. I use their projections, I use their tools, the simulations that they run. So same page as you there. You may have also just answered my next question with that question, which is what kind of training? No computer programming. Okay. Yeah, no formal or informal. All right. Well, then let's get to probably the most fun background question, which is approximately when did you start getting involved with DFS and what drew you in?
So like we were saying about the radio station, FanDuel was being advertised heavily at that time. So that was like 2014 maybe. So this is like a brand new concept to so many people. And it's the first time I really heard about it. And I would hear the commercials being like, oh, I won $1 million with my free entry. And part of me doesn't believe it. But then you start to actually see stuff online of the people who are winning, and just this insane jealousy like grows, because I'm like, if they can win, I can win. Why not? Because this isn't something you went to school for and trained, you know, like this is something that I could be just as good as any other person. And so I kind of had that idea in my mind. And so I was interning at KFan in Minneapolis. And
KFan is a sports radio station in Minneapolis for people who are not local here.
Yes, sports radio station. And they would do like you get like, I don't know, $50 free if you sign up with our code. So that's when I just made it there. I was probably like in the studio making it. And then I'm like, all right, $3 entries. Okay, it's impossible to win. And so I was not serious about it at all for a very long time. Every once in a while, I would open up the app and be like, let me get risky and put in like a couple $100 entry. And then when I would lose that, it would hurt so bad because I just got out of college. I'm so poor. So I'm like, can't do that anymore. But I just always thought, like, no matter what, it was always in the back of my mind, like, that will be something I do when I have some extra cash, when I'm not going to be hurting if I lose it. Like, this will be something I do. And then COVID happened. So it was like, no better time than the present.
Yep. So that was around 2014 when you got your start, when you were at the radio station and you learned about DFS, was around 2014?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's about when I started. I think I started the 2013-2014 NBA season. I think I started in 2013. So kind of the same time frame. And I had the same mindset. I didn't have a lot of money at the time, and I was on the same page where I was like, man, if I had the money to play this, I would get serious about this, because it's addicting, right? It's a fun sport, and I'm also competitive. So as you know, seeing other people win, I'm like, I can do that too. I can do what they're doing. I know I can.
Yeah.
Are you also a former athlete? I think maybe that's where my competitiveness comes in.
Yes, I mean, I'm also one of 4 children, so there's like competition all the time. I have 2 older brothers, so it was always like them trying to tell me boys are better, and I'm like, girls can do anything except for beat you guys with brute strength and like physical ability. I'm like, but DFS, this is something I could do. But I was pretty competitive growing up because I did always play like 3 sports. Throughout high school, I did volleyball, basketball, track and field, and I threw shot put. And then I threw a little shot put in college, but realized like I am not going anywhere with shot put. I might as well just work a little more and make some more money.
Yeah. Were you at the University of Wisconsin-Madison?
No,
okay. You're the U of M. That's right. Which is also a D1, a tough school to break into the track team.
No, unfortunately. So my first year, so I went to high school in South Dakota. I really wanted to go to anywhere but South Dakota. I wanted to go to a Big Ten school. I wanted to go to the Twin Cities right away, but I was offered a scholarship for one of their other schools, U of M Morris. And my mom was like, you'd be an idiot not to, because an academic scholarship. And so I did my year there. And then I was like, well, I just really need to be in a bigger city because I'm getting sick of the small town thing. And when I'm like one of the better shot putters, then there's an issue. So I did think about playing and throwing shot put in Twin Cities, but it'd be like the type of thing where I'm on the bench. I only get invited to the meets where everyone goes, not the important meets. I wouldn't be very good, but I'd always wanted to at least like be somewhere big enough where someone like me couldn't outthrow other girls. Because I've never been like super big and strong, and I was sick of being in small towns where I was like the biggest and strongest.
You want to be the little fish in the big pond.
Yeah, I wanted to know what it felt like.
Okay. Yeah.
But that was the U of M for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a big school. So all right, so 2014 is approximately when you got started. Were you a winning player right away, or how long did it take for you to get to the point where you were playing DFS regularly and winning enough that you could keep it up?
So absolutely did not win. But I was only I mean, 2014, if I did a contest, it would be like a $3 contest. Maybe like 20, let's see, was when I moved back to Wisconsin. So I was living in Charlotte. And again, I just was not spending my money on that type of thing. I was just trying to be in a new city and trying to be cool and hang out downtown Charlotte all the time with all the other people who seem to be just naturally rich. So I'm like, I can't play DFS right now. But then I moved back to Wisconsin, and it's a little more low key here. Our beer is a lot cheaper. We drink a lot of Miller Lite. So I finally had a little more money to play with, and I was getting a little bit more serious, but I wasn't using any tool. I wasn't using an optimizer on the regular. I would just try one out, and I didn't really know what I was doing. It was just like I was messing around. But I would throw in enough entries that were like $100 and then like see a little bit of return that I just was like, it's getting closer. It's getting closer.
And approximately like what year is this that we're talking when you started doing?
This would be 2018, 2019.
Okay.
So
and you're playing like high stakes or like high-ish stakes. You're playing mid stakes, entering contests that were like $100 buy-in.
Yeah. So like for me at the time, it was pretty high stakes, but I was only doing like a contest, maybe like one every few weeks, maybe one just a month. Maybe I would take off like an entire half a year. So I didn't actually play. So I always like think of like when I actually started playing was really last year. And it was right when the year started. Probably, I mean, it was right when COVID started happening, and the football season right before then kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because I had like a $7,000 win and I was like hooked, but then I just kept losing, and like the stupidest things would happen to me, and I just felt like this isn't just going to be a fluke. Like that $7,000 was cool, but like that can happen on the regular if I just put my mind to it. So then, okay, now it's COVID time. Now I have no reason to ever leave my apartment. Husband's studying for the CPAs. I just all day, every day, like taking work hours too, unfortunately. But I was just like, that little bit of win and then all those little losses, I just was like, I need to be serious about this. And then January I think I had my first 100K win. And then that was like when
2021. Okay.
Yeah, 2021. So right at the start of the year. So I had my first one in basketball. And I mean, after that, it was just like set, done, set in stone.
And now you've got double digits. Like that set you off. You were set up at that point. Kind of helps to build a bankroll, right? So for me, I know my first 6-figure win really allowed me to increase my play a lot and play a little bit more comfortably, maybe take some more risks after the big win. So do you think that was part of it for you? Got that $100,000 win, and that allowed you to both increase your volume a little bit, but also just kind of maybe increase your risk capacity? Do you think that helped there?
100%. I don't think you can actually keep winning consistently without that extra money to play with. So, I mean, it didn't really feel good at the time, trying to figure out the growing pains of like once you start doing the high stakes contests. So once I had that, I think it was like a $500 contest. So to me, it was pretty high, but I could only afford, putting one lineup in at a time. Once I had that bigger amount of money, I was like doing FanDuel's like $2,000 contests, smaller amount of people, maybe I can win more often. And then doing multiple lineups. I mean, that's just like how it could just start being more consistent. But that's what gets hard at the end of the year. And so I was getting like to my frustration breaking point, and then fantasy happened. I'm like, oh, I love basketball again.
That was good thing to reignite your passion for basketball and DFS. All right, so which sports do you play? Right, you won the NBA Fantasy Championship, then you won a Millionaire Maker in NFL. Are those sports that you play like every day that that they have contests? You play NBA and NFL, and are there other sports that you also play regularly?
Well, so One that I never knew that I would have such a passion for is baseball. I've always thought of it as a pretty boring sport, and I can't sit and watch the games. Like for me, I can sit and watch basketball like lasered in focus, but then baseball just loses my attention so quickly. But when you have like a billion games going on at once and you're checking your phone for all the updates, I'm like, oh, baseball is awesome. Baseball is lit. So I just developed this new love for it. And because after fantasy, I'm like, well, there's really no more basketball to play. There's like the last couple games, but I just like decided I'm going to try out baseball now. I have no idea how it's going to go. And it actually ended up being far more consistent for me than the other sports. And even though like I'm not a stats person, I really appreciate when other people pull stats and I just read everything because I am definitely a reader. I read anything on the internet I possibly can. So baseball is just like, well, let me just look at all these stats, all these projections, and then you start making little gut instinct kind of calls about things, and you start to see, oh, well, this happened last time, and there's so many games that you can pull from, and there's so many games a week, and there's so many contests. So, I mean, that was also huge for me because I get really antsy waiting like days in between my next big contest. Like I wanted it every day. Like dead of the summer, it was too hot to go outside. I just wanted to have at least something like big every night. And baseball on FanDuel was like a really good opportunity for that.
So do you only play baseball on FanDuel?
No, I play DraftKings too, but it is a little more difficult for me. Well, I don't know how I feel about it this year. Last year, I found it way easier to win the high stakes contests a lot, and FanDuel because of the fact that those contests would be so small. So it's pretty cutthroat. What word am I looking for? Pricing structure or payout structure.
Oh yeah, the payout structure is rough on FanDuel more so than DraftKings, right? It's a bigger difference between first and second.
It's a much bigger difference on FanDuel, and I mean DraftKings, the only big difference would be in like the millionaire contest, but on FanDuel, it's really cutthroat, which is okay with me because I was willing to be more risky with lineups and do multiple lineups. So having like a small pool of people and I have multiple lineups, I just was confident that like I at least will get my money back. But this is the best shot I have at like 100K consistently. So it just kept going with that.
Nice. And it's got just the consistent contest is really nice for baseball. I'm want to talk about what kind of player you are a little bit. You alluded to you said you played $100 contest, and I said okay, so you were playing kind of high stakes, and you're like, oh no, but then you're talking about doing $2,000 contests. So you definitely play some high stakes contests. Do you also are you a 150 max player? Do you play in the main contest where it's where you can 150 max? You play in those contests that also play high stakes, or what kind of volume do you play in terms of entries, and like how many lineups do you typically play in a day?
So when I said like 100, that was like a lot of money for me at the time, but now it's hard for me to even like think about it that way because I know that in order to make a lot of money on DFS, you can't think of that as like a high number anymore. So my brain is like completely switched, and to me like a normal entry, I mean, because then my new normal started being around like the $555 contest, the $600 contest, or the $777 contest. So those were like what I was doing until I actually had a really comfortable place. And so then when I finally hit like my comfort level and with baseball, then it was like, oh, there's all these $3,000 contests, there's all these $2,000 contests. But at that time, it was the new normal, and so that's just what I started playing. And I don't know, it's just crazy how things can change. But
so you're typically playing the highest stakes contest, which is like $2,000 or $3,000. And how many entries are you playing in those contests typically for baseball, basketball, football? How does it vary based on the sport?
Because with football, so it was like Sunday's your work week, so you enter a million different contests. So I would be doing like all different types to see what I would be the best at, because football, it's I mean, I love football so much. It can bring like the million, but then you just have a lot of bad Sundays and you have to sit on that all week. So it's a little different. Baseball was nice because I'm always like on to the next one, on to the next one.
Yep.
Football, I'm like, it's Sunday night and I want to start making my lineup for next week because I didn't do that well. So when it comes to football, I'm doing all different types of entries, but my favorite is always just doing the highest entry and the lowest amount of people, because I know I'm not going to be the smartest person ever when I'm in these contests, but it's my best likelihood of winning. If people are playing a little more scared because they're playing with more money, and you feel a little more risky, which is what I think was like the secret sauce, was I felt a little bit better making risks, getting those low ownership guys, while everybody else was like, I can only do this one entry, and if I don't win, I'm screwed. Once you like don't have that fear anymore, then you can just play like what is best for your personality. So like my personality is not to go enter all these entries like the 150.
Yep.
I've tried, and there's just some things that like are just more difficult for you probably than other people. Like for me, waking up early in the morning is very difficult. It's like, I know I'm never going to change no matter what, and how much I wake up at a certain time in the morning every day, it will always be just as hard the next day. So I'm like, is this one of those things where this will always kind of be like hard for me to do? Because I'm an emotional player. I mean, I try to keep my favorite teams out of my my playing, just because I don't want to be
biased.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about that. If you do ever get biased, because so you say you don't play the 150 max contests. You never play them, like the 30,000 people in the contest. You never play those.
So I've tried them maybe like 2-3 times. I mean, one Sunday I didn't have my lineup set yet, and so I end up like entering basically the same lineup so many times. I mean, I went through like some.
Been there.
It was a busy time in my life too, because we're also we were planning a wedding, and we had just moved into a condo, which we just sold today. So
Congrats.
things very fast around here, and I would all of a sudden be like, oh crap, I didn't set my lineup, and I get so angry with myself because I let myself get in the way of my winnings a little too much. And when it came to like that max entry, and I didn't do all the homework I was going to do for it, I'm like, well, that's just me getting in my own way. I shouldn't have even started doing that until I was fully ready to sit down and get these entries in. I don't know why I thought like I could be faster at it, but I was quite slow. But when it's a smaller contest, then I just feel like I can, it's better for me to just like go with my gut, and make decisions where you're like, this is what I picked up for having watched this team for this long. Mm-hmm. You start to like pick up all these little things that you think are going into your lineups to make you better at winning. If I start just doing the statistics, that type of approach, then none of that other stuff even mattered. I mean, to a point it does, but not as much as like what I like about it. So when I won the Millie, it's because I remember scenarios between certain players from the year before, and where it crushed me because I didn't have that person, or, you know, and that just like comes right back in. And I'm like, okay, so I did 3 lineups. I'm like, this is what my lineup from my previous hurt is going to be. So like, I guess that's what I just have more fun playing. I mean, it is a crazy wild ride every night when I sit down and watch sports. But if I didn't have like so much invested in those couple lineups, I just don't know if I would have as much fun, and if this would be like worth it for me to like be doing every day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The emotion with it.
Yeah. All right. So you don't play the 150 max. So do you not even play the like 555 and the 777 anymore? Or are you just strictly playing the like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 contests?
Well, I mean, I've kind of, after, I guess maybe football season, maybe it took a lot out of me. I didn't really want to jump into like what I was doing before. I started slowly moving back into basketball, but we had just bought this house then, and we were getting settled after the wedding. I just didn't feel like I was in the proper place to be doing those bigger contests every night.
Mhm.
So I've kind of been a little more dormant. I mean, taking a step back, like Awesemo has said before, where his step back means he's still gonna be playing so that he can still stay on top of what's happening in basketball and whatever sport is going on. So that's what I've been doing with basketball and baseball, is just like trying to keep my head in it. But I haven't been doing like the $1,000 entries every night with multiple lineups. But now, like it's spring and we've finished our taxes. We got the house settled. We just sold the condo. Tonight, I'm ready to go back to work. Like I'm ready to have 5 entries in. Well, actually tonight in baseball would be 4 entries. So I'm like,
is that the max in the contest that you play?
Oh, it's actually 2 entries tonight. Yeah. So tonight there's a really small contest again. It's like 67 people. I'm like, this is back to basics. This is what I did every day last summer, baseball on FanDuel. So I want to get back to that as quickly as possible.
So do you typically max out those contests, whatever, if it's 2 to 4 entries, whatever it is for those contests, you max those out?
Yeah. If it's 2 to 4 for sure. Sometimes I just think like there's no need once you get to like 5 or 6. I have noticed just, over the many months of doing it, like how many lineups did I have in that time that I won? How many lineups did I have in that time? You start to notice patterns about yourself. So like 3 is usually my lucky number. I mean, that's when I won the million. It's like I need 3 lineups, and sometimes having 4 or 5 would be a detriment because I change what I was going to do in those 3 lineups. So I have 3 different strategies for those guys. But when I add more to the mix, then I start combining the strategies. When, you know what I mean? Like it starts to get messy. And especially in golf, I'm so mad at myself for doing this multiple times, where I changed my lineup so much that then I'm like, well, I knew I wanted to include this player and he's not there, and the contest just locked because I was messing him around. And that's why I kind of have to stick to a smaller number, because then I know I have my 3 strategies set out, and we'll see which one is the one this week that works. Because on any given week, that type of strategy would work. That type of strategy would work. So I guess that's kind of my lucky.
Nice. Yeah, and it just seems like it's a good number for you to kind of grasp what you want to do with your lineups, approach it with different strategies for each lineup. So that makes sense to me. That it's just I think we all have different numbers of lineups that are better for us. What I was going to ask before, I feel like if I were only playing 3 entries a night, as a Timberwolves fan, on nights when the Timberwolves are playing, I'd be like, all right, here's my Karl-Anthony Towns lineup, here's my Anthony Edwards lineup, here's my maybe non-Timberwolves, maybe my D'Lo lineup. I don't know. So I feel like I would get trapped in a little bit of bias, especially if they have like a good matchup. I wouldn't be able to help myself if I'm going to watch the game playing some Timberwolves. Do you ever feel like your fandom does bias you at all, or are you pretty good at keeping it out of your lineups?
At the end of the day, I've really just, because my most hated players become my favorite players after they help me win big. It's like I never liked Joel Embiid my whole life, but he, with like a last second like pass or something, got me my first 100,000, and I'm like, oh, I love Embiid. So I have biases towards players, but sometimes I like playing the person I hate the most. I don't let what I feel about them ever like get in the way of my lineups, and I try to stay away from my favorite teams, which also can be a detriment because that's how I got hurt in baseball, in the baseball championship at DraftKings. I was going to play Brewers, and I all week thought I was going to do the Brewers, and then I'm like, that's just my heart speaking. This is stupid. I change it. The Brewers went off, and I would have won.
Oh, that's rough.
It was a tough pill to swallow. I'm like, I should learn from fantasy that sometimes your people can pull through. But I normally just stay away from Bucks games because, I love like I love Drew Holiday so much. I don't want to get mad at him because he didn't win me money, you know.
Yeah, I suppose. But sometimes you
But
can't avoid Giannis, right? I mean, there are nights where it's just like
oh yeah,
Giannis projects so much better than everybody else. What can you do?
yeah, he's fun to play. It's still scary. I still have this feeling like, oh, this could just be his off game. It's so easy for him to just have one of those, and I don't know. I don't like thinking about it too hard. I'm either gonna play him or not, and I know it right away. Because if I think too much about it, then I'm like almost talking myself out of like loving him as much as I do. I don't want to think like he's gonna let me down or he's not that consistent. So I'm just like, leave that alone. If there's another comparable player playing that night, I mean, of course, there's slates where you have to play those types of people.
Yeah.
If it's a small slate or something like that.
Yep. All right, but if you have the choice between Giannis and Jokic, you're more likely to play Jokic because you don't want Giannis to hurt you.
Yeah. I mean, as good as Giannis is, he doesn't like do 5 70 burgers in a row. So
yeah,
Jokic is pretty safe. Although I have taken Jokic and he has done terrible for me, but no one else.
We all have. No, I've had that experience too. It's rare for Jokic, but that's why we play him a lot. So eventually, if you play him all the time, he's going to let you down eventually, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I'm like, how does this guy let me down? Come on. But I mean, you can say that about every single player after you play enough.
So you play primarily, it sounds like, basketball, football, and baseball are your 3 main sports.
Yes.
That you play most consistently. Which one do you think you have the biggest edge in?
I guess maybe I would answer this question differently at different time periods because I've always thought like I would have the biggest edge in basketball. Like that's what I've always surrounded myself with. That's what my first passion ever was in sports. Like I am a huge basketball fan, but then I like struggle with it more often than baseball and football. So I think that, I mean, baseball last year, I would have said this is the one I had the biggest edge in, just because I knew what my sweet spot was as far as the size of the contest I wanted to play. So I already knew that about myself. I'm not just like experimenting. So I do experiment with different contests at various times, but this was like my bread and butter. I felt confident that I was going to be covering more bases, so to speak, with my lineups. Like I knew what a lot of the winning lineups looked like all the times I didn't win, like I was just taking notes every time looking. So I felt like I finally got to the point where I put these lineups in, and I mean, it was almost for sure money at that point, which I never felt about any other sport before. So I'd say probably baseball, just when I start to like get in my groove with it. Okay. Because I could think I'm in my groove with football and I am so wrong. I just have like a horrible Sunday. And I'm like, I really thought I was getting good at this. Like what happened? Like after the Millie, even there was so many Sundays where I like was feeling really bad about myself, and it was that money didn't even help. Like I just wanted to show that I can like still win. And it would be just like the smallest things. So I feel like baseball always felt safer because maybe just because there were more contests going on, but also because if your batter gets hurt, it is like far less bad, and just it doesn't absolutely destroy your chances. I mean, you probably won't win first, but you can make your money back. In football, someone gets hurt, you're done for. There's just so many like that's it, your day's over, stuff like that. Or just, I don't know, like injuries was huge in football. But then in basketball, it's like, well, who decided not to play tonight because they just could take a day off? Like they're all-star, they don't have to really try tonight. Steph Curry, for example, comes to Milwaukee and he's like, well, I'm not going to play the second half. And all these little kids are like, we came to see you, Steph. Yeah. But baseball is just like, it's safer. Maybe they won't score at all, but it's not going to like ruin your chances at survival.
Yeah. All right. So baseball probably number one for you, even though you're a bigger basketball fan, it sounds like, and you said you used to play basketball. So and football. And of course, winning the millie, it's tough to, you can't really do that in baseball. Unfortunately, there aren't too many baseball millie makers. I guess there's usually one or two a year, but I guess you can settle
Yeah.
for those six-figure scores in baseball as your biggest edge. All right, let's talk a little bit about process. Just so we've gotten into some background and talked about how you get into DFS, which sports you enjoy playing. Let's just on a more, let's start with some basic questions that I ask every guest. Do you do any simulations or use simulations from outside sources as part of your process?
No, because this like goes back into I just look at someone else who did it and then read their answers. I guess I've always been that type of person. It's like, well, the answers are out there. I just have to go find them. And I could find anything online. It was really dangerous. Like when you take online tests, and we had laptops in high school, and I'm like, I could find this answer so fast and so easy. I'm like, the answers are all out there waiting for me. So if I want a certain anything, like I could just type it in and then go find someone who wrote this really nice, eloquent article about it. So I'm always reading everybody else's work, like nonstop.
Going back to cheating off your friend's homework in math in high school.
Totally.
As you said earlier. But then, so it's not a part of your process. You don't run your own simulations, but do you use any sources that run simulations? Like, so for me, for example, I use the Awesemo tools. I use the Boom Bust tools, which are all based on simulations. It sounds like you do probably read some of those use those tools that maybe run simulations to give you odds.
Yeah, I think that when I look at sites, and especially now with baseball, I'm getting more into the data, like just trying to just expand my mind a little bit more with it. So I found a website that is wonderful information about every park, and it runs simulations about the two teams meeting at that park with those weather conditions. And so I just sit there, and I mean, I can get lost in it, but it is really, I mean, you can't you can't use that information to like completely make your lineup. You always have to know that like human factor, that like even though it's not good pitching conditions, that pitcher is going to go off because they always do it, that like other stuff like that. So I always try to keep that stuff into consideration, but I do find it maybe helpful. It's at least really interesting to look at all of those different types of simulations and just to see the extensive data that these people put out in this website that's for free. I'm like, all right, like I don't need to do much work. But then I'm really big into using LineStar for I mean, that's just like how I started. So I will dabble with lots of other people's tools, but then what I go back for like my main information kind of is like the sounding board, that would be LineStar. And it's because they list a lot of history. So like the past year, maybe even a little bit more, anything that's relevant as far as games that these players have played. And then you can look at all the stats from every game. You can see all the percentages going up against whatever player, if it's whatever defense in football or whatever pitcher, just having that at my disposal. And then it'll be color coded. And I'm like, it couldn't get like better than that. So even though you do still have to like use your own intuition a little bit, having all that stuff laid out for you, it just helps your intuition. Over time, you start to really develop patterns with certain scenarios that that you went through in order to win. But then, I mean, it took maybe like a full year to understand all of the lingo and terminology and stats, that because there's so much information listed. And at first I'm just looking at the big numbers. Then I'm like, oh, what does that number mean now? And what is that? And I'm learning all this new baseball terminology. And my husband can't believe it because he never thought he'd ever see me into baseball. But it's just amazing the information that is there. And so that one is nice because it gives you a lot of that basic that I would be asking if I didn't have this tool, and I could just go ask somebody else all of the questions that I would want to know in order to see how I feel about the games. They're all answered on that website. And then
and this is LineStar.
Yeah, and you get the perfect lineups always listed with their little trophy. So that's also extremely helpful. It's like who's usually in a perfect lineup, like anything that's relevant. And then of course the optimizer. So they do have an optimizer. Okay. And That's
That
a
was my
nice.
next question. So
Yeah,
you're not a hand builder, or do you do some hand building and some optimizing, or do you just use the optimizer?
I at first when I started, I would do the optimizer, and then like I can't stand seeing like $1,000 left over. I know I can switch that in the in the widgets or whatever, but
Sure.
I I just want to see what they think, like what can you do with these players? And then I would tailor it a little bit like right away. Now I'm purely like I make my lineup and then I will only use an optimized lineup to compare, see if I'm like on the right track for what type of score I'm looking for, to
Mhm.
see if because the optimizer will take into consideration what other people are saying about this player. Like, are they liking them? Are they hating them? What is their usage been? What's their ownership? That stuff gets factored in. So I want to not be completely off the map with like the players I'm thinking of and like the obvious choices for tonight.
Mhm.
I try to get a feel for like what everybody else in the sports community is thinking. And I, it's easier for me to build my lineup by hand and then do the optimizer. And then if I want to mesh it or if I just want to keep it away or whatever, because sometimes I just straight up look at mine. I'm like, no, mine's so much better. And then I just go with it. But sometimes I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I need to make some changes. So it's really nice just to have that tool to compare. Because right away, of course, I wanted to use the optimizer. Now I'm like, I trust my own self, but it is really nice to still have it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's something that I don't really do. Also, Fantasy Cruncher has a lineup builder tool, which you can go
Mhm.
in and like put your lineup in, and it can tell you how well it projects and how high owned it's going to be and
Yeah.
stuff. And I haven't really gotten into using that just because I am a 150 maxer, and I have not had a ton of success at high stakes. But that seems like something that, particularly if you're only doing a few lineups,
Oh,
that seems like a really useful kind of thing to do.
actually, it's interesting you say that because when I was just like, watching the show a little bit to get familiar with you guys before doing the interview, I did hear Awesemo talk about that tool. And I was like, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
That's like the next step. That's the next thing I want. Like, I know that that is exactly what I've been looking for. So
yeah.
I'm interested to try that out.
Definitely a useful tool, and I know that a lot of pros do use it. It's probably something that I need to do if I'm going to start playing higher stakes rather than just high volume in the large field contest, because yeah, it definitely seems useful. All right, I was going to ask you if you do your own projections or your own ownership projections. I think you've kind of already answered that. That's something that you go to outside sources for.
Yeah. So they're not extremely accurate on all these like random tools. So I like to look at what the site is saying. It's probably ludicrous. It's like that's one hard thing to pin down for a lot of these tools. But I know that like someone like Osmo is a lot more knowledgeable about what that ownership is going to look like.
Hmm.
That's someone that's basically a tool because he's played so much and he knows all the different types of situations and
Yep.
what he sees from all the guys, and he's just been so immersed in it. So I'll text my friend and be like, so what did Osmo say the ownership look like? And so then he'll tell me. So I'm always using outside sources. I when we were at one of the championship live events, Osmo gave me like a free trial or something
Hmm.
to um, to his website. It was the tools, and then I tried to log in at home, and I'm like, was I just like too drunk to understand what he was typing in on the phone, and did I not get my username right, or did I not do something right? So I haven't been able to log in, but I'm like, oh well, maybe it's for the best. Like I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, but
Yeah.
obviously I really need to start going in it.
Yeah, I understand the logic of not wanting to fix something that's not broken. And I mean, when you've had the kind of success that you've had over the past year, it's like, why am I going to add new tools in if it's not broken? Of course, that's my philosophy. And then I talked to some of my other guests on the show has been like, no, you need to be always changing your process, especially when you're winning. You need to be
Oh yeah,
always
totally.
evolving. So
I
yeah.
would agree with that. I would totally agree with that. I think I never try to do more than what like my brain capacity it will be able to handle like really well at that time. So I don't
Yep.
want to do anything half-assed.
Yep.
So I'm like, where am I at right now with how I'm feeling about this? And then am I looking for more? Because sometimes you can have too much information. And I was starting to get to that point, I think probably with football. I was never following my own instincts anymore. I was listening to so many different people who I'm like, okay, well, tell me what your sources are. And there's all these different types of sources, and somehow I listen to them, I lose. But if I would have listened to myself, so I'm like, it hurts. But when you can like take on more information, you're starting to understand whatever sport you're playing a little bit more. Then I think that's when you should start adding things in, and maybe not completely changing what you're doing, but don't tell, like, so one thing that bothered me was when I would go to one of the live events and someone would tell me, like, how are you ever going to keep winning on that? Like, you need to do this, that their tool was better. I'm like, that really screws with people, because you do make them feel like, oh man, I'm missing out on something else. They go try it, they lose their money. I mean, you didn't have to do that. So everybody should always play where they feel comfortable, even if it's just like, if it's a site more basic or whatever. If you're comfortable with it, that will always make you play the best. It's all the times I've felt uncomfortable, unsure when I do the worst. So
that makes sense. Do what you're comfortable with, enter what you're comfortable with, use the tools you're comfortable with. I think that all makes sense to me. Let me take a minute away from this conversation with Rebecca to tell you about our sponsor, Noah's Advantage. Noah's Advantage is bringing you a different way to enjoy DFS with player props contests. It's 100% peer-to-peer to help level the playing field, with over 500 player props offered. All new users get a $25 deposit bonus with promo code Awesemo, that's AWESEMO. Noah's Advantage offers mass entry capability with big prize pools. Beat your friends, not the house. Use our Noah's Advantage projections and optimal lineup tool to help you take down big prizes. Download in the App Store or play on noahsadvantage.com. So let's talk about your process for specific sports. So I know you've had a lot of success in MLB, NFL, and NBA DFS. Let's start with NBA. So how long before the first game's locked do you typically start working on a given slate?
Oh, as soon as possible. I usually start looking at a lineup. Like, I mean, I look before I go to bed. I'm always on my phone. So before I go to bed, when I wake up, I will wait in extreme anticipation sometimes for the site to reload for the next day. So the optimizer and all the players, and they do a really good job, like midnight every night. They make sure that everything's loaded. So the projections may be off because it's just like the first iteration. They're putting the players out there, but I at least can get familiarized with who's all going to be playing, because then I sit on it for, while I go to sleep the next day, I sit on all the stuff I've already read, and then I start adding in the new information. And I always tell myself, well, don't actually create the lineup until like an hour before, because so many changes happen and you don't want to get flustered if you like really got set in something. Sometimes like knowing and reading and doing all your research and then having just that hour so you don't overthink things. Everything is more fresh at that time, because there's times I forget about a player that I was interested in because I made a lineup and then I just forgot that they were someone I said, like, maybe I should look at them, so, but sometimes the anticipation kills me too much and I start making the lineups like right when I wake up.
The night before. Okay. All right, so that's so I usually don't start looking until a couple hours before, just because I'm like, and so much changes in NBA in like the hour or two before lock that it's like almost like, what's the point? But I think that does make a lot of sense. You look at it the night before, you kind of get an idea of what's on the slate, and maybe that helps you to, even though sometimes you're going to forget the players that you intuitively like, but at least you figure out who you like intuitively before you kind of look at some of the tools and stuff. So that probably does make some sense to at least look at it the night before.
Yeah, and every game like gives you a different type of feeling, different type of emotion. I know I always speak about this stuff as emotions, but so much of it is, and these emotions are based off of like real things. So it's not like, oh, you're just an emotional person, you're going to let your emotion cause you to make stupid mistakes. It's like the emotion is just the product of like all the things you've been seeing between like this certain matchup, this certain thing. Like for me, every time I see the players or I see who they're playing, I'm like, I get this like feeling, this some sense of feeling that I know.
You might call it intuition, right? Like it's a little bit more like you've been here before, so you have some intuition for what you expect from players.
Well, fantasy, I thought for sure I'd have the same lineup as someone else. So fantasy in Miami, my intuition was in Milwaukee. I have seen like Cameron Johnson cash threes. I've seen Crowder cash so many threes, and you're like, what the heck? Where were you the other night? And you had like 10 fantasy points, but then against my Bucks here in Milwaukee, it has to be in Milwaukee too. It's not, in his house. Comes to Milwaukee and just kills us at the 3-point line. Just stupid stuff like that where it's the big guy shooting. But enough times of that happening, I'm like, of course, like these would be my utility players. And when I saw no one else did it, I'm like, what? I'm like, oh, I guess you're not from Milwaukee. You don't know the heartbreak that he brings.
Yeah. So your pain helped you in that situation.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So what is involved in your process? I mean, you said that you do use an optimizer at LionStar, but what are you listening to any shows while you're working on your lineups, or are you kind of doing it in silence? Do you like your own, solitude and focusing on your own?
I do like the solitude, actually. It's weird. And it's hard kind of to be at those live events before the contest starts. Like I don't even have interest in like mingling and talking up until it's locked and there's nothing I can do about it anymore. And then I'm still gonna like have anxiety. So I really like being alone when I'm doing this, because it hundreds of times now maybe where I will listen to something and it sways me and I make these last minute changes and then I was right prior and it kills me so much every time. But it's like it doesn't stop happening. So I really need to block out, because I will always be persuaded, even if I tell myself not to, because people plant little seeds in your mind.
Yep.
So if I block everything out and I have pretty much solitude, then after I scour for as much information as I can, then I'm okay, like sitting back and listening. Maybe like on Sundays, of course, we just put on like pre-game day stuff and I'll listen to what they have to say. At this point, I'm pretty much like already set with like all the things.
Locked in. Yep.
I'm pretty locked in, but sometimes someone might have an interesting point. So I do listen to people talk, but people have a tendency to just say things that maybe no one else has said, so that if it happens, they'll look really cool, or like that person didn't tell you any reason behind like what their opinion was. Or I need facts with everything someone tells me. Like I want you to tell me, like, why do you feel that way about this? But when you listen to shows, you get way less of that. I mean, I'm sure it's different. Like if I started like, I don't know, watching maybe just more Awesemo content or something like that. But I do have a lot of people who already watch it and then let me know what they said.
Right.
Because I don't think I would be able to sit there and then like actually listen to a whole show. My concentration's not that great.
Okay.
You probably notice like I'm always like looking off.
I'd noticed.
So if I'm in my phone, I can't also listen. But my husband is a saint. He does all that kind of work for me. Like he will listen to all different types of shows. And then he'll just like kind of pick and choose what he thought was most important, like the takeaways. And, like that's the kind of information I like getting. Like, thank you. He just summarizes like, hey, like this is what these people said about this. It's an interesting scenario. Don't make it change what you were going to do, but I wanted to bring it up because, and so just like, that's perfect for me.
Is your husband also a DFS player, or is he just taking in this information to give it to you?
He really just like works to give it to me because he's a CPA, and he like last year he would join me, but he would never do the really expensive contests. I mean, it took me a while to even be honest with him about how expensive the contests were. But he finds a lot of joy in doing everything I'm doing, helping me, but then just putting his in smaller contests and letting me do the thing I need to do. Because he knows like he can't get me to stop doing the biggest money possible. Like, I know it probably would have felt a little bit better, like, you know, earlier last year when things were a little like there wasn't a million yet. I know he would have liked that I just slowed down a bit, but he's not going to ever tell me, no, I can't do that.
Right.
And he doesn't want to watch me like do it all by myself either. So he's just like, even though it's scary as heck, I'm going to be there for her and I'm going to do whatever I can to like help her. Then he's also noticed like times I've gotten mad in the past, like what did she not have at that moment? And maybe we didn't have enough time between like we can't do things like right at 6 o'clock because you do not know what other changes. Even if my contest is locked, I only do late swaps, so there's many changes I can still make. So there's like a time period where we just can't be like rushed to go anywhere or do anything, because at the end of the day, like even if I'm optimistic about getting something done in a certain amount of time, I always take extra time, or I always like I just yeah. So basically, because we're late for everything we ever go to, but he knows now, like, well, when it comes to DFS, we're like extra late. We'll be like an hour late somewhere. So let's just not schedule anything.
It takes time. Yeah. That makes sense. So you mentioned late swap. Is late swap an important part of your NBA process? And what does your late swap process look like? Are you making changes by hand, or are you going back into your optimizer and using that to help you make changes?
So it totally depends. Like sometimes it's like 5 minutes left. I'm like, oh crap. Because I will like forget that I needed to keep checking on this one player. Like there'll be someone I'm like, I don't know, like I'm gonna keep my eye on them, and then I'll forget and be like 5 minutes left. I will not go into any kind of tool. I will just go in there and just do it manually and like look through the players manually, you know, like old school when you first start playing. And sometimes that actually is better for me because I don't waste extra minutes. If I'm like in a serious time crunch, I'm not wasting any extra minutes. I'm just going in there and everything is instinctual at that point. You just like, you go with your gut. So hopefully that stuff doesn't happen too much. But whenever it's like the so many questionables, so many GTDs in basketball, if you didn't have late swap, you couldn't really play successfully. You could never have like a really high score because you would never be playing any risks. You would only be doing the people you feel the most safe with. Late swap allows you to open up some more options for yourself, that like if anything happens that even changes your mind about something, so you're like, okay, I'm going to put these players in as my maybes. Late swap, you can confirm it later, and you can, you know, any last minute stuff when you have someone going in the night game, well, like two people going in the night games, you have a much better chance, I think, of winning because you played the best guy you possibly could from every game that happened. A lot of times when you don't want to have to maintain your lineup, you don't want to have to use the late swap or anything, you just stick with like a bunch of the early guys, and then you watch everyone pass you at the end. Because like a really good player, you didn't know for sure if they were going to play, or any little thing that happened, to make sure that out of every game you got like the best you possibly could. So I think, I mean, I couldn't live without it, but I just mostly do the changes inside by myself, but then sometimes I'll go to a tool if I really need help, if I'm in a sticky situation and can't make the appropriate recipe for players.
Yeah, I feel like so for me, late swap is I'm late swapping 150 lineups, so I couldn't possibly do it by hand. But with 3 entries, I imagine that it's obviously easier to do by hand. Also, emotionally that would be more tough for me, just doing, you know, changing 3 lineups, because then it's like, oh man, I switched off the nuts. I would have won if I had just stuck with my lineup. Has that happened to you before, where you've late swapped and
I have to say, like, you just hit the nail on the head. Like the worst part about doing the contest that I do, that is the worst part. Late swap has screwed me in the past because I mean, I just overthink things so much. And then you get all this extra time to decide. So there's something comforting, like when you do one of the contests or events where it's like completely locked in. So like the baseball championship, I'm like, oh wow, like it's kind of freeing. Like I don't have to have anxiety about this rest of the night. What's done is done. But it definitely is like the worst part about it is that emotional. But when I have done the 150 max entries, then I'm like, how the hell do I start late swapping these guys? Like you find out some information, especially like if it was a small slate, like one game, and you really needed one guy to play who was maybe going to sit. Yep. I mean, so many of your lineups have them, and it just feels like, did I just waste my time with all of that? So
it can be rough. Yeah.
It's daunting.
If you guess and you guess wrong, it can definitely put you in a bad spot. I assume that's the case with, just 3 lineups too, unless you're leaving multiple spots open so that you can, really manage moving players around and getting to better combos. But if you just leave one spot open for a player that you're making a guess on and then that player's out, that can put you in a rough spot.
Yeah, you definitely have to only like make those risky moves like, okay, I might fill these spots. You have to find players who are similar price. And so some days it's not even possible to play around with a lineup even after like only the first game starts. And there's so many games at night, but for whatever reason, the pricing just didn't work out where you could actually really switch anybody.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So you kind of have to just always play it by ear. Like, well, these guys, okay, so I might be switching these 3 players around because the pricing just works out that way. So I like when that happens. I like having a little more freedom that way. But you don't do something where like, if that person doesn't play, you're absolutely screwed because the next guy is $2,000 cheaper and you're not going to win with that.
Yeah, it's not going to work out most of the time. All right, so you're not very active on Twitter. I guess you have been for the past 24, maybe 12 hours or so. You've been a little bit more active on Twitter. You kind of came back to us, but in general, you're not very active on Twitter. And I know a lot of pros, including myself, use Twitter as a source of news for injuries, lineups, and other such things that might help in DFS. Do you use Twitter for those purposes? Have you been using it for those purposes, or where do you get that kind of information?
That's so funny. Okay, so yes, now I'm like fully back immersed in Twitter world and I love it and I've missed it so much. But I since I had deleted my old account from when I was in college and at the radio station, I don't follow all the appropriate people. I don't I just know I'm not going to get the best content until I can just have like a decent amount of people start following me. So it really helps like when you put my handle out there, because then now I trust that these are all DFS people who are going to be on my feed. And so that helps like just right off the bat. But before I had something like that, I was just using my husband because he's on Twitter every day checking sports. He only uses it.
So he's your news source. He's using the same sources as the rest of us and then just relaying it to you.
Yeah, and the more he has like been involved in this world with me, and he's been to every one of the contests with me, he knows exactly what to look for and he knows who to listen to. So he's like a great sidekick who like, I will be the one stupid enough to put this money in, but you'll be the one who's like giving me anything I need in order to make that happen, because he just goes through all his Twitter stuff and says something interesting to me. Or I even just like love when he gives me the NBA paints to try to guess. Have you done any of those?
No.
Oh, I can't follow the account because when he does it with me, he hides the name and I have to guess what the NBA paint person is supposed to be. And it's like a pun on their name.
Okay.
So we were at least on Twitter always looking for those. One popped up yesterday. I was like, I can't look at this. I can't see the answer, because that's how you get really good at testing your basketball knowledge, is to think of who the heck that player is and what that paint is supposed to be and what pun is supposed to be. So he's always like bringing me stuff like that, or like the football Weddle game. So not Wordle, but it is Weddle, and then Portal. Yep. So I think he gets all this stuff from Twitter, but he brings that to me and I'm like, this is just more practice for me and I love it. So he's always just quizzing me, helping me. Sometimes he has serious questions that he's thinking about, like starting to do some kind of contest, or he'll like do a smaller contest and then tell me like after he wins, and I'm like, oh, because like, I mean, I want him to do like as much as he wants, but I don't want him to feel like he can't do it because I do it.
Right.
But he doesn't really care that like he's doing all this work while I'm the one putting it all in. He just
That's good.
doing it every day.
You're working together, supportive. That sounds really nice.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's stupid and cheesy, but without him, I probably wouldn't even be doing it, because you do need someone to support you. You need someone to tell you, first of all, you're not crazy. Someone to say, I believe you, that you can do it. Someone just to, like, make you feel sane. And then, like, when you get mad, they can at least understand more than like another person would understand like the problem, because he sees you doing it every day and he can respect it a little bit more. It's like really the only reason I can even do it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, my wife is also very supportive. She's not really part of my process the way your husband is, but still very supportive. And it's definitely helpful to have a supportive spouse or significant other. When they're not supportive, I imagine that's pretty tough. Actually, it's a spot that I've been in past relationships. So
yeah, I was gonna say,
not as enjoyable.
Common problem, I think, for a lot of guys. So if you have someone who is really cool and supportive with it, like that is a cool girl. Like those are the type of people like hanging out with. People who are like, well, I don't do it, but I think it's really cool, and I'll hang out with you, like, and enjoy the stuff with you, like bringing your friends to the live events, like people who can really get in it, even though it's not something they are doing. Like those are the best people, and it's so important to have them around.
Yep, 100% agreed. All right, so getting back to some process stuff, maybe we'll just gloss over a little bit for NFL and MLB, and then get into some more some different types of questions, because we got pretty into your NBA process, which is I think the most interesting process. But let's just touch on NFL and MLB really quick. So for NFL, when do you start working on? I think you already mentioned that you sometimes like on Sunday, if you're having a down week, you start working that same day on the following week's contests.
Oh God, yeah, totally. It all depends. And it's funny, is like talking about my process is like nothing concrete. Like it just always changes, depending on the week, depending on what's going on in my life and stuff, depending on what I have time for, depending on what I just like am sick of doing. Like if I'm sick of sitting there and researching, sometimes my brain needs a break from information and I just need to go make lineups. That happens with football quite a bit. So because I'm always like, don't dwell on the loss, like just look at the next one. Everything is always like, okay, and I can deal with it knowing that there's another opportunity coming up. So I'm okay with losing because I know that I'll just win in the future. But I can't just take a loss and then be like, well, I'm going to be done for a little bit, because a lot of times it's like the win that comes right after. So football, I always feel that way. Like, all right, this was a really bad Sunday, so I'm already looking for it. So it was actually kind of nice, though, doing the single slates for Sunday nights if I had a bad Sunday day.
Yep.
Because then it was like super motivation. And that actually like came through for me a couple of times where I'm like, I put in just a crap ton of money, because you're really putting most of your money on one day, and you don't have like, so you can like kind of get away with it because you're like, well, I'm not spending it throughout the week, so I can do more for football. But then you put all that money in, and then like you were just completely in the wrong line of reasoning when you were thinking of what was going to happen in each scenario of the games today. So then like I can't handle just watching those games fizzle out without anything. Like I can grasp right after that. Sunday nights, it's perfect because I'm like, well, I got Sunday night. So then I'm like, let's be kind of risky because it's Sunday night. I'm angry. I had a few beers and I just want something crazy to happen. So, I mean, that's worked out before. One time it was actually with the Packers. So I'm like, I don't know if I can do this game without messing it up completely, since I love the Packers. But I also was really set on winning the 100,000 that I didn't win earlier that day, because for some reason I thought for sure I was going to win it that day and I didn't. I was like, but there's no $100,000 contest for me to play tonight. So I added up all these different contests that would equal 100. And I'm like, whatever, I'm doing it. Like, I already was like very crabby at my husband. If I come out with like this new sense of energy, like, well, we're going to win this next one, then it's just going to be a much better night for both of us. It is risky being the Packers and then doing all these different types of contests and only one lineup for the whole thing. And I would never recommend that to anybody, but just because like it was such a crappy day and I, of course, like way too long, it was about to lock soon and I wasn't sure if I want to do multiple lineups. I just put the same lineup in multiple times in all these contests. And because I won first, it all added up to $100,000. I think it was like 4 or 5 contests and I had to be first and second in all of them in order to reach that. But I just said earlier in the day, I'm like, I have to do that. And then divine intervention, the Packers somehow.
That's great. That's funny that you were so focused on getting to the 100,000 that you just entered more contests than you typically would. I'm surprised there were no 100,000 at first contest. That seems like a rare thing. Obviously, that's because you're playing high stakes and not high volume.
Yeah, it was on FanDuel and it was high stakes.
Oh, sure.
Because if I felt like, okay, I wasted today and I need to make money tonight, I will never mess around with like the big contests. Because the most that happens is I just tie a bunch of people when it comes to the single slate football games. But I think it's anybody's game when it comes to the single slate. It's more fun in football than other sports to do it. The salaries are just like such crazy numbers. Sometimes you're like, you have your $200 guy. And that's what won it for me in the Packer game was I took Juszczyk.
Oh yeah, Juszczyk.
Juice. He scored. It was unbelievable because he had not had like any points the whole season. And all of a sudden, I'm the only one who has. I'm like, see, this is why you got to do those small contests. Like, I made a stupid mistake, and I mean, not a mistake. Obviously, it worked out. But like, you do something like that, and the smaller contests are the only ones where you see like the true benefit of like, I'm the only person who had that person, or I'm only one of 5 people who had that person. It just also feels pretty cool instead of tying everybody because they used statistics to do exactly what you did. And you're
right.
Like,
yeah. I've been there where I've hand built a lineup and tied with somebody else who presumably used an optimizer, and it's definitely a bummer when you split with other people. So for football, is late swap a big part of your process as a high stakes player? So for me, because I'm doing 150 entries, I typically only late swap if I have a lineup that I want that's doing really well and I want to optimize it to get it better projected, or if a player is injured or something. If there are no injuries that really change the afternoon slate, do you still, because you're only playing 3 entries, do you do late swap to like, for example, if your players are doing really well, do you get more optimal, or if your players are doing poorly, then do you try to get more contrarian with your afternoon players, or what's your process like for football?
I guess I never put that into words before, but that is what happens naturally. I feel like that's like human nature. I feel like it's like, well, what does it matter? Like I need something different. I need to have some kind of thing to hold on to as hope, because just obviously, like you said, they're not performing as well as you thought. And the only opportunity that's even left is to be different. So yes, I think in those cases, I try to do as little late swapping in football as possible because of making last minute errors, switching it right before it locks, because my anxiety got the best of me. Like I heard something about this player and now I'm like, was I wrong for thinking it should be this player the whole time? And then I do the swap and then it locks and I'm like, no, I want to go back. So I try to avoid that. And I try to keep my teams pretty much set in stone. But then there are days where it's like, let's just throw anything at the wall and see if it sticks and go super contrarian. I mean, I don't know if that's ever worked for me. Maybe it's gotten my money back in some cases, which is enough for me. Like it's always an okay day if all the money comes back.
Yeah, right. I'm typically happy with that. I mean, obviously you're trying to win, but more often than not, at least for me, I'm losing money most days. So if you can make your money back, typically that's better than average.
Yeah.
All right, so for MLB, I'm just let's skip over process just because we're going long and I still have a lot of questions that I want to ask you. But one thing I'm curious about with MLB is so because you're playing much different contests than I am. So I'm playing, contests that have 30,000 people in them. So I am full game stacking typically on FanDuel. I'd be playing like 4-4 or 4-3 lineups where I'm playing 4 batters from one team, 4 or 3 from the second. Do you do the same thing when you're making lineups for high stakes, or are you more trying to get the higher projected players, or are you building in those correlations with full team stacks?
So when I first even attempted a baseball contest, I would see the stack tool and I'm like, why would I really want that? And then I started to just open my eyes a little more. I'm like, oh, duh, baseball stacking is great. Stacking can hurt you in some other sports and some other scenarios. Yep. And sometimes it can hurt you in baseball because you're like, oh, this lineup just looks more appealing to the eyes to see a couple players or a couple teams and just all the players from just those two teams. It looks better than having all these multiple, it kind of feels like random. But the first time I ever won 100,000 with baseball, I had the most random lineup. And some guy that I met at the fantasy live final, he saw the back of my shirt and was like, "You're rjako22? No way." And he goes and grabs his friends. And he brings out his phone and shows a screenshot of when I beat him for $50,000 and I had no stacks, just absolute one-off team. And I was like, one-off is bad? I'm like, I don't know. So far, I've been lucky with my one-offs. But then there's nights where you're like, you just completely shit the bed because they're like, the one-offs did not hit. Yep. So the time and place. And sometimes if I'm feeling like my stacks I've always been just choosing it wrong for maybe a week. And I'm back to one-offs. Okay. Sometimes I just can't get my stacks right. It's so
you still do it sometimes. So sometimes you're just the stacks aren't working out. I'm just going to go back to what has worked for me in the past, and you just go to one-off lineups.
Fail safe type thing. The stacks is what I usually do now. Just but not too much so. Which because it scares me when I see someone's lineup with 5 guys from the same team. So rarely does it seem to work out, but when it does, it does. And so that's why having multiple lineups, I'll do one that is some solid stacks, mini stacks. I'll do one that's much larger stack, and then I'll do one-offs. I like being able to try out the different strategies each night, because stacking a team that doesn't do well, you have no shot. So at least if I only had one guy from that team and my one-offs, maybe it is just a single guy type night. Sometimes every team did not do that well, but there'll be one star. Yep. So, I mean, you have to be kind of lucky to have that happen, but you have a much better shot than choosing the stack where that just absolutely did not perform the way everyone thought they would perform.
Yeah.
Sometimes whenever you see someone getting hyped up too much, whoever's batters are just getting hyped up they're going to have the best day, that is a red flag, and I run from that.
I mean, yeah.
That has happened to me too many times where I'm everyone talked about doing this stack, and I do it, and nope. So
then that stack is chalky and everybody's playing them, and you gain an advantage by going away from that stack that everybody else is playing, because you're just reducing the field size if they don't do well. And it's baseball, so most teams are not going to do well most nights, even in great spots. So that makes a lot of sense. So actually I had deleted this question, but because we're talking about correlation, I was going to ask, Line Star had posted a lineup where you won $150,000. You came in third place in a contest, and you had Kirk Cousins as your quarterback and no Vikings receivers anywhere in your lineup, no run back in the game. Is that something that you typically do in NFL, where you just completely don't do any kind of stacking with your quarterback, or was that kind of a salary thing, or what happened there?
So when I saw that you had brought that out, I'm I couldn't actually even remember it. I'm racking my brain. I'm when the hell would I ever choose Kirk Cousins? I don't think I ever choose him. So I'm this sounds like a situation where my back was kind of up against the wall to find value,
Okay.
and he was consistent enough for me. And now that I'm actually talking about it, this was for like a larger sum of money. I think this might have been the million.
It must have been. I mean, you got third place and you won 150,000. So I would
Yeah,
imagine it was Millie to first.
Oh, damn. Now you bring this heartache back.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to bring this back up.
I do remember this now. It's so funny that you found it, because I didn't even know that they retweeted that one. Kirk Cousins is like the only reason I didn't win the million then.
Yeah, he did. He had a bad game.
He had a bad game.
Yeah.
After he was way more consistent for price level than anybody else. I'm like, Kirk Cousins, who would have thought? And I feel like maybe I've chosen him. Sorry, my dog is crying. Maybe I've chosen him in the past where I just didn't feel like it was that bad of a choice. But then after like seeing it, I'm like, why the hell is Kirk Cousins on my team? But I did have more expensive receivers. So then it was one of those situations where I think so with the million contest, I get like way too into my head and I overthink everything. And I'm trying to hit every like possible outcome. Like it's going to be this person's game. I always put a receiver with their quarterback unless it's a running quarterback, and I think that they're just going to have a lot of touchdowns. Yep. Depending on the defense. Sometimes with pricing, you just want one value player, so all your wide receivers can go off. But I'm pretty sure this was a situation where it was like choose between Kirk Cousins and like who else did I have on it? Was it like expensive tight end or something? Maybe Kelsey.
Let me see. Really,
but I think I was going back and forth between the value in the tight end or value in the quarterback. And yep. I think if I would have done it the other way, I would have won $1 million.
No, you had Dalton Schultz at tight end, and it actually doesn't show his salary, so I don't know how much he cost on this particular day. Your big scores where you had Tyreek Hill and Deebo Samuel both put up huge scores: 50.6 for Tyreek, 38.7 for Deebo. Yeah, I don't know. Curtis Samuel also really let you down with 5.9 fantasy points. So you had some players that really went off, but yeah, Kirk Cousins also really let you down with 11.12. So I don't know. Wow. I don't know if there was a player that you could have correlated with one of these receivers that would have done better. I don't know who the quarterbacks were in this game.
And so in this type of lineup, I've noticed myself doing this. There is a type of lineup I do where I'm just so receiver heavy because it's been a while since they all popped off. So if I have more lineups to play with, I'm like, all right, so everybody I think could just have a monster game because like Tyreek, if you don't have him on the one he like has 50 points, 60 points, because then, I mean, he is expensive for only getting like, I mean, last season, I feel like it was like 3 points, but you're like waiting for the boom. So this is one of those scenarios where I spent a lot on Deebo because he is consistently getting big numbers. Mm-hmm. And then Tyreek, I thought it would be a big game for him. For whoever they were playing must have been defense that he can handle really well. And then I must have just thought Kirk Cousins will do because no other quarterback is going to like score so much that it makes me unable to win first. I feel like it was something like that, but okay. It was disgusting to look at because it looks ugly, and I never picked Kirk Cousins. So to see that, I was like, oh my God. I do tend to have a player on multiple lineups, but I will always try to make one lineup without that person so that I don't let anything that was like too emotional like get involved. It's like I'm wrong sometimes. Like sometimes I really think someone is going to have the best game ever, all the stars align, and then they don't, or they get hurt. Injury is actually like probably the biggest thing. Is like when you have an injured player on most of your lineups, that sucks. Especially if they're like a really good player that was supposed to give you a lot of points. So I always have my safety net kind of lineup.
Okay. So in 3 lineups, you typically will do a max of 2 for any given player. You typically are not playing 3, even if a player projects extremely well. So say it is a shorter slate where it's like Giannis is the best projected play by 10 points, or Jokic if you want to take the bias out of it. Then will you play that player in all 3, or even then are you trying to just stick to 2 out of 3?
In case of injury, like that is a lot of salary to use on someone who like gets hurt. Those big guys tend to get hurt frequently. Or if it's like a game where they're we didn't know they're going to blow them out that bad. You do not want to end up in that situation too. So if I end up playing a player on all three of those lineups, it would most likely be like a crazy good value. So starting point guards out, I choose the backup, and it just like works so well with everything else I want to do. So I don't want to, but I mean, that's even like gotten me in trouble, but it's not like the end all be all. You can still win money, because if they were of value, then them not showing up is not going to be as big of a detriment. So I'm like, okay, if they end up like only scoring 10 points, I can still get by. I can still double my money. I can still whatever. So first place maybe is like out of the picture. But if the player does have a really good game, you're gonna be so thankful you had them on all three lineups. So there's days that it's like best scenario, days it's not. But it's safer than doing your all-star on all three.
All right. So I know, I think you said that in NBA and MLB, you're typically just playing one contest in a given night. You're not entering multiple contests. But for NFL, not entirely accurate.
I mean, it's hard to even remember. What was I doing last summer? Last summer was mostly one contest when it was just baseball. But basketball, I feel like if I'm not like doing a high entry contest, if I'm just doing something around like, medium, like 500, then maybe I want to supplement it with like a really small contest on DraftKings. So DraftKings is cool in the way that there's so much to choose from. So I can mix and match contests. Sometimes I just think like this one's safer, so I'm going to put some more money here. I'm not going to get $100,000 out of it, but this is like a low amount of people, really good opportunity to make a little money. Then I can have my more risky or multiple lineups in the other contest. So sometimes there's multiple. I would say baseball is mostly just like the high stakes contest, and then basketball maybe 2. Football is like 100.
So it sounds like so typically if you are playing in multiple contests, you will enter different lineups in each contest. Obviously, you gave the example of the exception when you wanted to get to 100,000, you entered the same lineups in every contest, but typically you will
do as I say, not as I do. Don't do that.
You wouldn't advise it. Okay.
I will not advise that. It just worked out one time. But I mean, unless you're just so confident with the lineup you have. But sometimes I do like to add a couple of the contests together to get amount of money that I would be really happy with. And there's been times where I can only afford to do like one entry here with like the money that I left in my account, that or whatever reason, or I already like have so much money in football, so it comes to like the afternoon games, and I'm not going to have all that money back until the end of the games. So I just play with like what I have, and I'll make 2 lineups that I want to include, and then I put them in contests I think they would do the best in. And then turns out like, oh, if I would have had that one in that contest, I would have came out like so much higher. So it's happened where I'm like, I put the wrong lineup in the wrong contest. So that happened actually a few times last year, like before I had a lot to play with, and my husband's like sick of me saying that line, like I put the wrong lineup in the wrong contest. So I kind of made it a little bit more of a promise to myself to not keep doing that, and just make sure I'm doing like the same lineup in all these contests, and then maybe some additional lineups in that contest, but at least always have the same lineup so I don't have that regret. Sometimes like losing, but then not having all that regret with you is better. Or winning, I mean, regret sometimes is just like way worse than any amount of money, because you're so disappointed in yourself. So sometimes like it's not a what if, like I had a completely different lineup. It's a, well, I mean, I wasn't going to let that one not have this lineup in, so that I couldn't look back on myself and be super pissed at it. I had this awesome lineup and then just didn't put it in like the 100,000 one, or I didn't put it in this one. I don't want to look back on that. So I generally just put that
I do the same thing. I avoid that kind of disappointment by I've stopped playing any contest where I'm not going to be satisfied with the first place prize. That's just my way. I'm like, The only time, if I am going to play a contest that has like only 10,000 at first or something, then I'm going to play that same one in a bigger contest. Otherwise, I'm not going to
That,
even bother entering those
exactly,
lower. Yeah,
that's exactly how I feel too.
yeah,
You're doing a service to your future self
exactly,
because
exactly. For your own mental health, you
for
need to
your
do
own
that.
mental health.
What
Yeah.
about cash games? Do you play any cash games, or are you only a tournament player?
Not really cash game. I feel like sometimes like just out of boredom, like maybe if it's very slow day, there's not a big slate going on, maybe I don't really want to bet that much money and I just want to see how this goes.
Hmm.
There's been times I've just like done a couple, and I mean, it's fine. It's just never like, oh my God, amazing after I win, because it's never like a crazy amount of money. So it just like feels good, but it also feels like, do I want to feel like I spent a lot of time for not a lot of gain? Um, but yeah, mostly I stay away from those contests unless it's just one of those like random times. Especially like during the day, I started experimenting with different types of contests. I'm like, well, maybe I'll find that like I have a niche somewhere, um, and or maybe I just want a little extra to play for tomorrow or whatever. So I just try to get a little amount that
Yep.
would get to like whatever amount I needed. Um, or sometimes I just want to try a new sport and I don't know much about it, but I do a little bit of research and then I just play like low stakes stuff.
Okay.
So like the CS:GO and the League of
And
Legends.
lols, yeah.
Yeah, the lols.
All right. So in limited circumstances, you'll play cash, but typically not part of your everyday process.
Yeah.
All right. One more question about you being a high stakes player. So you're entering contests that have sometimes just like 100 or 200 players in it, maybe sometimes more. But because you're playing in those contests, do you feel like you see the same players over and over again and kind of know how they're going to play? And is that a big factor in how you're building lineups because you know how the other players play?
It actually really is, but you only get to that point after playing for like however long. Um, so, my second serious football season, that was when I started to really get good at a single game slate because I do recognize that it's the same guys doing the big money every night, and it's familiar to me. Like I don't mind seeing it. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to lose because it's all the big names. It's Awesemo, Chipotle Addict. It's all those guys. I'm just like, I'm going to beat them tonight, and I want them to see that I beat them because it's just like fun. Because I did meet them, and I mean, they were always everybody's always happy for each other. It's nice to see a name you recognize, but I definitely have started to understand a little bit more how I should play if it's those guys versus like
Hmm.
just a bunch of random names. When it's like a lot of names I don't recognize, I mean, it must be like a weird hour that I'm playing. And it's scary because I have no idea. They'll end up with like the high scores and really crappy scores. And you know what I mean? But
Yep.
when you see the big names, you know generally like how they're going to do. And you know what you need to have to beat them. So
Hmm.
also like knowing what they usually get, it allows you to just like benchmark that and then try to push forward any way possible. Like if you know that you need to be a little more creative against them, or if
Hmm.
you're like, no, I just straight up am okay with like tying them. I want to have the smartest lineup for tonight because this game is just too risky to take any other chances. Like
Right.
then I'm okay with like just splitting the money. But there's certain guys that I always see that I'm like pretty tied with. Like that we're always like,
You have similar lineups.
yeah, and it was always NFL single slate. And which one was it? It was one of the big names, and I'm like, oh, it's always you. But then he'll
Chipotle
have like,
Addict.
so
I don't know.
maybe it was like the whistle goes woo or
Okay.
whatever.
Whistles go. Yeah.
Maybe it was him. Maybe it was a different name. It was one of like the big ones where I'm like, I know I'm getting good if every Sunday I see my name next to his.
Yeah.
And
That's a
he'll
good
have
indicator.
more lineups in because Sunday night I'm always like just one or two. Sunday
Okay.
night's not the night I spent all my money earlier in the day that I was gonna play with, and I'm waiting for it to cash out. And so I'm like, okay, one lineup, two lineups. and he'll have Max. So it'll be like his name, my name, his name. I'm like, ugh. So that sucks.
Yeah. That's rough. All right, so we had one listener question from Young Ben Stiller on Twitter. Asked, any advice for my friend Maribel, who I introduced to DFS? Any tips for someone who doesn't have time to crunch 150 lineups into an optimizer? What is the most efficient way, time and energy, to put together a good lineup? That is a perfect question for you.
It really is. I mean, that's exactly like how I tried to think about it going into it. Like when I first started, I wasn't going to be able to spend the whole day doing it, and I needed to spend my time wisely. Now it just feels like I have so much time. Why wouldn't I do the max entries? But sometimes when you do try to do things efficiently, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter that I have more time in my hands. I still should be looking at things more efficiently, because that's just always, that's the easiest to take in for someone like maybe who, if Maribel is like me and you're maybe not a numbers person and maybe you're not as knowledgeable about everything like these guys are who have been playing it for a long time, you need to efficiently find the information that is enough to give you some kind of like starting ground. So some platform. So if I just need to know like certain key information. So maybe just like not start with like the most extensive tool, but go to a website where you just like read somebody's take, and I don't know, maybe you start from there or something, but just take in a little information that helps you already with like the knowledge that you're bringing forth. For someone like me, it was definitely good to start slow and then start adding in all the numbers and the tools. So I don't know if she's that way too, but that's what I would say. Just like don't be intimidated by everything, because just a little bit of information can lead to a win somewhere. Don't play the high stakes until you have the money, so that you do it without being extremely upset with yourself. Just like start practicing, because then you're like, well, I was getting my information from this website and then I won this little contest, and then you can see like what works for you. But if it doesn't work, don't risk a lot of money right away. So I didn't start winning the 100K until I felt comfortable enough to put the $555 entries into the basketball one. So this was like winter last year. I knew I was getting better. I could see my progress, but I knew I was not going to like easily make my money back. I knew it was so close, but not quite there. So I just kept playing like those $100 contests, because you still could get a decent payout. But then once you have that and you have the confidence built from winning that, then putting that into high stakes and then seeing that win, like that's the best feeling ever. But you really should see what you're capable of before you just like enter into the Shark Tank.
So dip your toes into some lower stake stuff maybe to start. And it sounds like you do a mix of using the numbers that are provided by other people mixed with your own knowledge of sports and your own, you played long enough. So I think that after a while you kind of have a good intuition for playing DFS too, which obviously if Maribel is just getting started, that's not helpful because she's just getting started, but maybe she has sports knowledge that is enough.
Oh yeah. And sometimes it's like the person who is just doing it for the first time that wins, because they're not looking at it with the same lens that all of us who are so wrapped up in it are looking at. They're just like, think of it more simple terms, and then that's what it takes to win that week, So it's not even like you wouldn't have a shot. Just like get familiarized enough where you don't make anything like stupid that would just shoot you in the foot right away. Like make sure you're covering your bases as far as injuries and everything like that. But anybody has a shot to win as long as they're just not making those errors that totally take them out of the running.
Yep. All right. Good advice for a new player who's just getting started.
Don't give up, because you will lose. That's why you have to play the cheap contest right away. Because if I wasn't like the most persistent person in the world, I would not have been successful because it was not that bright for a little while when I first started. Like, you have your little tastes of winning, and then all of a sudden you're like, I suck and I will never be good at this. But if you just keep going, eventually you finally get to that point where you're like proud of yourself a little bit, you're more confident, but you can't drop out of the race like in the middle of it. You have to keep going.
Let me take a minute away from this conversation with Rebecca to remind you to give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Be sure to also check out our monthly podcast giveaway. Just subscribe to our podcast channel and leave a 5-star review with your Awesemo username or Twitter handle to be entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. I think a lot of people start playing DFS and they lose for a week straight and they're like, oh, I suck at this, I'm going to stop playing. But it's like most of us lose most weeks. Like even the best players in the world are not winning every week. It's usually, I'm on a huge downswing right now and it's been months long, which is the longest I've ever gone. But like, that's not uncommon. People just can lose for a long period of time in a row.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, the best advice I ever got when I was at like one of the baseball live events was someone saying like, oh, you went through a down period for like 2 months, like try like a year. And when I heard other people go through that, I'm like, okay, so I'm not just like really shitty at this. Because as soon as you start thinking that you're not even good and you like see the people who are winning and you're like, I'll never be that, well, then you have no shot right there.
Right.
You have to understand that like you just need to find what the best contest for you is. So there's a contest for everybody. And a lot of times people who don't want to lose all their money, they think that they're going to win big doing like the $20 contest and stuff. And they're like, but you won. And I'm like, do you know what I put on the line for that? Like, it hurts. I don't want you to think that you should do that right away. And I don't want you to think that it's like easy or anything. But if you are struggling to put down the $20 for these contests, then I just don't think about these contests, like about how you're losing because you're putting it in like with 30,000 other people and you get so disheartened and you think you would never be able to make it to what I'm doing right now. It's like, oh my God, I would never have won those contests. So stop like being disheartened by that. Just understand that like you need to find the easiest way to make a little bit of money so that you can capitalize off of that, like that extra money that you can spend. As soon as you have advice. Yeah.
Just play the contest that you are comfortable losing your money so that you don't get disheartened is my takeaway there. Is just like, don't play the contest where if you lose for a week straight, you're going to be disheartened, you're going to give up. Play contests where you can lose for a week straight and be like, okay, it's a learning experience. You know, it's not a ton of money to me. Play it the level that you're comfortable at.
Totally. And don't, if you are doing like the big contest and you think a couple lineups are going to ever really make you a lot of money, like don't get down on yourself when it doesn't happen, because it just means like there's people doing max entries, so you have to find something else. Doesn't have to be forever, but just go find a different contest for now.
All right, so we talked a little bit about live finals earlier, so we don't need to get too much into it, but I'm curious what draws you to live finals. So you won the FanDuel live final championship. You've also been to DraftKings MLB and I think NBA live finals. So what is it that attracts you to
an NBA one? Probably like the bane of my existence is not being able to secure the NBA ticket. I think it was another situation, wrong lineup in the wrong contest type thing.
Oh no!
Because I put the good lineup in something else that would make more money. This was just like a contest ticket. I don't know. Anyway, I was pretty bummed about it.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Baseball and football.
Yeah, my computer froze right there as I was asking that question and had the Zoom up over the question, so I couldn't read the part of which contest you had been in. So I brought up another sore subject for you, bringing up the NBA championship. But you were in the DraftKings MLB and NFL championships. I know that's I have not made any of those live finals either, so I know how hard it can be when you get second place. Yeah,
the basketball is always during a time where I'm not like doing my best in fantasy, or I'm not, I don't know, like summer was like perfect time. So I loved and
Yeah.
in fall. So summer and fall are great times for it. Winter is like, wow, I'm already depressed. Now I'm like trying to win, but I have anxiety about not winning. And so
Yeah.
you need the spring and summer to come, and then it's easier to make it to these finals. So I've gotten a couple of tickets for each contest, for a couple of the contests, I think multiple tickets, which
Yep.
helps quite a bit.
So you do like to do multiple tickets. So when you get to a contest, you don't just say, okay, I've got a ticket, so now I've already got the vacation. They're paying for the vacation, that's good enough. You still like to go for multiple tickets to these contests?
Oh yeah. I mean, with those players you're going against, I just think like you need two lineups. You need the one that is a little more risky, and you need the safe one, and then hopefully you can come out with some big money, because you can't have this small of a pool with this big of a prize like any day of the week. This only happens a couple of times a year. So like I try pretty hard without like just wasting money to get multiple tickets for those contests, because I'm like, it's just the best odds. So I'm always like for the small pools, big money. I don't like to squander those opportunities.
Yep.
But
what is it? What is it about live finals in particular that you that draws you in? Is it the vacation aspect of it? Is it the prize pools are typically larger? Is it because you like interacting with fellow DFSers, or what is it that that really attracts you to the live finals?
Well, I mean, the championships for sure, the money is like for me the biggest attraction. Like,
Yeah.
okay, a small pool for $1 million, all right, and then now it just keeps going up. So I'm like, I have to always be going to at least like the baseball and the football championships. The fantasy, I was gonna say before, actually, it wasn't the money that even drew me into that one, because I was like, 150 payout. It was 250 last year. Why did they lower it? And so I'm kind of like bummed. But then I'm like, wait, this would be a really cool experience. I watched the video, and then that got me hyped up. I watched like the one where it's the Playboy on the yacht, the Playboy sponsored one. I'm like, that looks like a really good time. And I really wanted to tell my brother and like show him that I'm like starting to do this very seriously. I also was gonna get married. I wanted him to walk me down the aisle. So I'm like, he's mad I haven't visited him in Charlotte in a long time. If I take him to Miami, he will be so happy with me. He could never be mad at me again. And I mean, he did have a blast. So that was purely like, I wanted to bring an experience to my husband and my brother. But then when I was there and I met everybody, I didn't realize like how much I needed that. So then once I was surrounded by those people, I'm like, okay, that is what like I really needed. I didn't even care about the vacation. I was too hot the whole time. It was just for other people. And the Bucks winning was pretty sweet. But what was like just really awesome, what kind of changed and made me more focused, and it made me feel like I was like on a decent path, and I'm not just like a crazy person, and that everyone's gonna wonder if I'm okay, if I need help, because I'm like so obsessed with doing DFS. They're gonna think I have like a huge gambling problem. Being around all those people like really helped just make me feel normal, and made me feel good, made me feel like I wanted to keep doing it, and seeing their success, definitely.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was a pretty supportive crowd in general. I mean, you said that you were talking to all of the top DFS players in the world, and then you said that you're also talking to their spouses. A lot of the plus ones were talking to you, and then of course you got the Instagram of the bartender. So you were it was a supportive crowd overall, it sounds like.
Every single person involved. So that was also, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if like people at FanDuel would be like, this not pro players coming, and it's like the new kid entering a high school with all these older kids. And I was a little worried that maybe it wouldn't be fun for me, even like maybe I would be awkward. Maybe they would kind of think I was stupid for being a girl and thinking I could like do this very seriously. But all my fears just like went out the window as soon as we were like a couple hours in and people started mingling more, because then people were actually interested in like my story and how I started playing, because they just had never met a girl who did it yet. And it's just like seeing an interesting, like an albino animal outside. You're like, I don't really see you. And you're not, it's not like they're sexist or anything like that. They're just intrigued. So they'll be like, yeah, I can't get my wife to watch sports with me. But then there'll be the guys who bring their wives. And those are like the type of women I love to hang out with too, because they're the type of women who love sports. They're along for the ride. So meeting people like that was really awesome.
Yep.
Most of the people at that point in my life had no idea what FanDuel and DraftKings were, even though I thought everyone knew it by now. No, they did not. No. So, and to hear, like, to talk to Awesemo was important because, I mean, it was also important for my husband because he talked to his wife and they got to bond over being with someone who is doing this, because you have to be a strong, secure person to let someone like basically ignore you for hours on end.
Yeah.
And depending on what season it is, depending on what they're doing at that moment, like if they're just grinding, like you have to just be like a really good, solid person to be around and not needing more attention than we can give, because if we are really focused on this, we're just going to snap and like get angry.
Yep.
So to meet someone really calm like her, and my husband just loved it. He's just like, I feel like we had so much in common.
That's great.
And yeah, so I was like, this is what we needed. We needed to see these people in order for us to feel sane.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a really nice trip. Was that so? Who throws the better live final experience? You've now been to FanDuel and DraftKings live finals. Who throws the better party?
Oh, they're so different. I mean, I really like concerts, music, anything. Like I love that FanDuel has brought in some cool artists, because I mean, who doesn't want to just celebrate? If you lost, you can just forget that you lost and then just go like see an artist. Like that to me is pretty cool. So they do a really good job of making it really fun, and giving you anything you would need, like anything that these guys would need to like have like the best time of life. Because there'll be so many players that like I don't know very well. They're not like the big names, but they made it into the contest. They bring their friends along, and then they have just like a once in a lifetime experience, and they're so thankful to be there. And like those guys are like the most respectful guys, but they're given so many things by FanDuel to make sure that this is like unforgettable. And then you see all like the seasoned pros come in and they just act like they're not impressed. Not that they're not impressed, but like they're so used to it by now.
Exactly. They know exactly what to expect.
Yeah. So I didn't want to be like, okay, don't drink. Maybe I shouldn't drink too much, because like they don't look like they're like partying or anything. Maybe like if you are really serious, you just come to these and you just do your job. Like maybe this isn't. I didn't know, like, will they take me serious? I was trying to find the line of like, I want everyone to take me serious and think that like I'm actually going to be around, but I also want to enjoy this like amazing free top shelf liquor and everything else. So I mean, everyone's really cool and laid back, so at the end of the day it's nothing to worry about. But
yeah, so FanDuel is FanDuel your answer then? It sounds like it's
I was
kind of leaning FanDuel.
But then I ended up saying that anyway, huh? I guess I just had a different experience with DraftKings because I couldn't fully experience it. So DraftKings, they take care of so much for you as far as booking. Like when I went for the football championship, they were giving out like one free excursion, and you could do a massage. So then they take care of the booking of the massage for me. Everything just seems to be taken care of, because they're just like on top of their crap, and there's so many more people involved. So they just like run a tight ship, which means like you're not gonna get as tight knit with like the group. FanDuel, you can just go hang out with the people that work there. They're just like you and me. And I am really good friends with one of the girls. Like she also was like one of the best things that happened about the trip, because she's so immersed in that world.
One of the FanDuel reps.
Yeah. So like just me and her taking pictures. We went off by ourselves because like, I don't know, she knew I needed a break from my brother being crazy. So then she like she lets me just like chill with her for a sec, and I'm like, okay, yeah, this is awesome. But like at DraftKings, you're not gonna like have that type of situation. It's just a completely different type of experience, which I would enjoy it even more. But it was like such a busy time period. So the baseball one I couldn't even attend because I had a wedding shower to go to, and then the football one, we had just gotten done with. Well, we got back from our honeymoon, and then we went to the FanDuel contest, and our flights got so screwed up that we missed like so much of the fun.
Oh.
And so every time I booked a flight, because I have never been the one to like book the first flight out in the morning, which now I do because of this, but any flight would get delayed, and my baggage got lost 3 times in a row so I had 3 trips in a row, one to Charlotte, one on my honeymoon, one, whatever. It kept getting lost. So even when we made it to the place, my bag wasn't there. So I think we both just got really worn out from traveling it and it not being like how it always has been, where you can just leave for a weekend. You can't do that anymore because the delays make you take an extra day off of work, and he didn't have any more days off of work. So I went by myself, which was weird, to the football one. And I literally just locked myself in the hotel room. And the only reason I even went was because I thought, if I did win, I really want to be here for that experience. And why not? Like, everything's taken care of. And I didn't go to the baseball one. And I don't want them to like not like me winning anymore since I don't attend. So I just wanted to see what it was all about. But of course, anything you could ever need is there. So it would have been a little more fun if I had someone with me, but I just did it very quickly. I was like in and out.
Any of the same people at multiple of the events? Like, what was Alex at the football final as well, or anybody else that that you met at the first trip that was also at the next live final?
It was weird. It was a lot of people that that weren't at the FanDuel. So I didn't realize that a lot of people don't just do both. I always assumed like, oh, you do one, you do the other. Like, they, to me, always went hand in hand. And then I realized like, well, there's like times where I am playing way more on one site. So maybe like for a lot of people, they do play on both sites a lot, but not for this sport or something like that. But then of course you would see Alex and a couple of the other big guys, I think, were there, but there were a lot of guys who looked like big shots. I could just tell like they were big winners because of like the people around them and like how everybody was acting to them. But I didn't even recognize them. So I'm like, I've been to 3 FanDuel events now. It was so weird to feel like I stepped in a brand new world again.
Interesting.
Yeah, and everybody was like sitting off like in their little groups, and there was no like intermingling of like lots of people, I guess, which at FanDuel, it felt like maybe they were just getting you drunk enough, but like you start off in your little groups, but by the end of the night, everybody's like in one giant like crowd having fun. So
That's
it was
fun.
Cool about that experience.
You're also on a yacht in FanDuel, right? That's fantasy.
Yeah.
Maybe that
But
helps.
even for I guess it was baseball where they had the chain smokers. So you have everybody in one area at the end of the night, and so they always find a way to make sure everybody's like in the same area drinking and partying. And at DraftKings, it's more like do your own thing. A lot of like older players, I think. So they were with their families, and yeah, because I met like wives like down when I was getting a massage. Like they're all coming in, and they're like, oh yeah, my husband, he does DraftKings. I was like, I do DraftKings, and they're like, oh, you work for them? I'm like, no, I play. And they're like, oh, weird. Okay, good luck. I'm like, yeah, you think I'm not gonna beat all those guys? But it did seem like they were a lot older than everybody who was at FanDuel. But
Funny.
I don't know. What do you?
In terms of which site,
Do
I
both?
play both. I play both FanDuel and DraftKings. I usually 150 max the main contest, and in my world the main contest is like the 30,000 person entry. It's not the 200 person entry. Yeah, I typically just play the largest field contest with the highest payout structure on both sites.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when I'm looking for like new contests and that one pops up, I'm like, oh, not this one again. Or, you know what I mean? Like seeing what content load for the next day, or if the one I want just filled, I'm like, well, there's this huge one. I'm like, ugh. Yeah. I just roll my eyes. It's just like a monster, a beast I haven't been able to tackle yet.
Yeah, I get it. We just have different styles, different preferences. All right, just a couple more questions to end out the interview. We're getting kind of long here, but I just wanted to hear. So you mentioned that you wanted at one point to get into sports radio, and then your focus shifted from there to making money playing DFS instead. But would you ever consider combining your love for DFS with your radio experience and doing DFS related content? Is that something that you could see in your future?
Yeah, definitely. I think I wouldn't have been okay with leaving my job and doing this full time if I didn't think that at least there's other opportunities within this world that I didn't know of. I found out that there's so much content that I just had never even seen. Like I never dug into it. And the more you explore, the more you find, or you just like decide to create something yourself. I haven't like had ideas of that for myself yet, but I know other people are doing that. And, you know, it's just like, it's the world that I've always wanted to be surrounded by. So it can only lead to good things if it's something I'm good at, and it's something that can bring in money, and something that I'm super passionate about. It's like before it was like always, here's one life and here's the other life, my professional life, and I can only do one really well. So this is just like, I knew that entering this world seriously over time would at least give me opportunities if I wanted to do something more.
For sure. Yeah.
It's like, even if I don't for sure, it's just still nice to know that you're not like, your life doesn't have to be bored. Like I have many different routes I can take.
Yeah, if you enjoy talking about this stuff, it seems like certainly a route that you could consider in the future. And I think you'll be a natural if you decide to get into content. All right, let's end it on a positive note. Just tell me about your favorite DFS win and or favorite DFS win celebration.
I mean, I guess it is really hard to top like the first live event because it was the Bucks. And I think if it had been any other team, I wouldn't say that that was my favorite because I don't actually really like going to Miami. I know that's so weird. I like bringing everybody to Miami. It's just so hot. But at the end of the night, it's cool down, so I can step out on like, be on the open deck and like look out of the water and have the Bucks playing right there. Like, so I was sheltering myself the whole day because it was too hot for me. But when the Bucks were playing, I mean, that was just like an indescribable feeling. And then I won. So I'm like, it would have been like really, really cool if it was $1 million, but any amount, even if it would have been like a really small contest, it was just so cool because it was me standing up there with my Bucks who are going to be champions soon. And the Bucks had been bad for so long. So, I mean, for also my brother to have gone through the Bucks being bad for so many years of our lives, he was just as like emotional as I was about it. He's like telling everybody about how this is like the first time we've ever gotten to feel this way about our team. So it's just like extra cool. But yeah, I'd have to say because of the Bucks, because of Giannis injury.
Yeah. I think you are rare among Millie Maker winners. Rare that you have won a Millie Maker, but that it's not your favorite win. That you know the $150,000 to first live final is your favorite win. But I think it also makes sense. I mean, it just sounds like the perfect scenario, having your husband and your brother there. I guess your fiance then and your brother there. You're in Miami. You're watching your favorite team win the NBA Finals. I mean, how could it get any better than that? So that makes sense to me.
I know, and it made it even better that I was one of the first females to get a live event under their belt because everybody has been rooting for that. I didn't know that. I didn't know that's what they want to see, something different. They're like, we're always hoping it's a girl. I'm like, oh, I'm glad I could do that for you. Like, there were so many surprises that I didn't even know like that was going to be. Sorry, my husband's home. But the Millie, that was just a necessity. I told myself I was too close on too many occasions. I have to win it no matter what. It wasn't a particularly fun Sunday, and it was like extremely shocking at the end of it. But then it was like, well, we did that. So I don't know. It was different where it wasn't like the coolest experience. It was just like, it was just the biggest relief I've ever felt. So like,
yeah, I can imagine. That's pretty great. All right, Rebecca. So your Twitter handle is at rjako22. Anywhere else that people can find you?
I guess I am on Instagram. I think my name is still Rebecca Jakovic, like the handle.
Okay.
So you see like Kennedy on some things, but my handles are always Jakovic. So Rebecca Jakovic on Instagram. But otherwise, I think that's.
But you're back in the Twitter world, so people can just find you, follow you on Twitter if they
that's all
want
that
to
matters.
get updates.
Like, what else even matters? I mean,
Yeah,
I have
exactly
email.
right.
Doesn't matter.
Twitter's number one.
Yeah,
all right.
Twitter's number one.
All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for joining me on episode 13 of High Stakes, and to Mike Lawrence for producing as always. You'll be able to catch episode 14 of High Stakes next Friday, time TBD, on the Awesemo YouTube channel and wherever podcasts live. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.